Surprise!
Terrifying.
Oh, that's good.
Should have told me to bring that pipe to smoke.
That's awesome.
Well, welcome everyone, and as you can tell, Anthony is gone tonight. We're sede abate, as they like to say, for tonight, which means other people will get a talk, but hopefully, hopefully not me. So to help with that, we have Ryan Grant on to walk us through the fall of Constantinople, as well as some of the aftermath. And then we have Adrian here, who does Guns and Rosaries with me, to be Southern Anthony for the night. So for anyone who may or may not know Ryan, why didn't you give us a quick overview of yourself, sir?
Okay. I am one of those guys that should be plumber or an electrician or doing something, natural, but every guidance counselor said, no, go to college. You need to go to college. And that you won't have a job if you don't go to college. And so I took their advice stupidly, went to college, and went to Steubenville. I converted when I was 16, although it wasn't like any great massive conversion. It was, I'd been
like a Steubenville conference.
Well, we did that too, but no, I actually went to the university for 4 years, and I'd been a Jew. And then we went back to the Episcopal Church when I was 13. And then my mother was watching Mother Angelica. She said, I got to go back to the Catholic Church, because she had been, then she left. So we go into the Catholic Church. I'm like, didn't really know much about it. Said, okay. And then gradually, actually, I think it was at one of those Steubenville conferences. I just wanted to learn more about the faith. Didn't really know why. Didn't, just God was moving me, prodding me along a little bit here, a little bit there. And, there it was. And then, Steubenville ended up becoming became the insufferable young trad. It's just got to tell everyone about how great the traditional mass is, and finally everyone's like, go away already. Fine, yeah, it's cool. It's go. And that sort of thing. Really got interested in history, theology, discerned a call to the priesthood for a while, so I was really bulking up in theology and philosophy. But afterward, I just gravitated to history, art history, military history, especially is my nerddom. Along with dumb things that nobody cares about, like Star Trek and things like that. So anyway, I run a small publishing company, and I translate books from Latin. Thank you. And just try to do something that not everyone else is doing. I don't do books on Vatican II, for or against. I don't do books on trad stuff specifically. I just try to get the tradition out. So here's Robert Bellarmine, Alphonsus where they wrote, translating it so we can read it. I get books on history, on the Reformation period, and early modern history is kind of my historical wheelhouse, so to speak. And I also love guns, and not a terrible expert, but I enjoy shooting them and maintaining and learning more about what I got.
I have a question, Ryan.
Yeah.
Do you subscribe to the theory and the opinion that Deep Space Nine is the best Star Trek series?
That's hard.
It's my favorite, personally.
I love it. I love the original series too, but it's really hard to quantify because their genre, their time period, and so different. And I love Next Gen, but I really have to say Deep Space Nine is hands down the best, because they take where the canon is in Star Trek with this semi past the communist omega point and stuff's like, okay, well, we've eliminated money because we can replicate it, therefore it's not scarce, therefore nobody needs it. What does humanity look like? And so now Federation's is paradise, everyone's given to service on starships, doing the stuff. What about when things go bad? What about things get difficult, when the nitty gritty? And of course, you couldn't make that show today because you have like the Ferengi teaching Jake Sisko about enlightened self-interest in capitalism, and you can never get brief. But it was great because it challenged notions. All of Star Trek, like all good science fiction, is basically a morality play. So it it's a morality play, basically. It's less to do with aliens and I mean, it has to do with sci-fi, obviously, and imagining what the future would look like. But it's also about us. Not even so much right now, because when it's done well, it's largely timeless. But you look at how classic Trek deals with an issue like immigration. They deal with it in Deep Space Nine. They deal with it in Next Gen. How do you deal with, certain other like complicated topics? And they never really hit it on the nose. Instead, here's this conflict. You see how they're dealing with it. And then it leaves you, the viewer, to kind of, and you might not agree with the main characters and how they did something. And from the standpoint of the show, it's thinking about it. That's what made it also interesting, but challenging your assumptions, challenging, like, what would you do? These trolley car experiment of things where Cisco's got to get the Romulans on board to fight these aliens from another quadrant of the galaxy, if you haven't watched it. And so he's got to deal with shady go-betweens for a whole bunch of different stuff. And they end up doing stuff, and then, which he doesn't sanction, but he has to live with the consequences of it. People die. And finally, he says, you know what? I'm not even going to know if it's right or wrong. I just know I'm glad we did it because guess what? The Romulans are in our alliance now. So it's a kind of moral reasoning you're left to grab. And they're not telling you this is good. And Cisco's not fine with it, actually. But you have to engage with that, think about it. And you get another one where they're on a planet. They found out that this weird temporal thing, that 200 years in the past, and all the people they met are their children. Because when they tried to leave, the ship crashed and they had to survive there. So if they go back to normal time and don't stay there, all these people are going to die. And the episodes gradually, everyone coming with the moral complications of that. And everyone agreeing, okay, we can't make these people just disappear when the timeline corrects. We need to make sure their existence continues. It's the right thing to do. One of the characters, of course, I'm not going to spoil it if you haven't seen it. What is it? What's the title of the episode? It's not. I can't remember. I'm not so much a Star Trek nerd. I know every episode by title and number and everything. But anyway, so one of the characters undoes all this because he's in love with one of the characters who dies there. You can't accept it. So they go back to normal time. All the people blip out of existence. And you feel the weight, what everyone else feels, that all these people are lost. That's why I love Star Trek. Those kind of dilemmas that you have to deal with. So I think DS9 did it a lot better. They treated religion a lot better, religious issues, whereas functionally everyone in the Federation is like an atheist. I guess we moved past religion. Yeah. And the Orville does a lot of that too. If you ever saw the Orville, that's just really demeaning to religion in the Orville. DS9 is actually really respectful of it because one of the main protagonists, the Bajorans, are incredibly religious people. Yeah.
I remember growing up watching Deep Space Nine with my dad. And he watched The Next Generation first, and then when Deep Space Nine came out, I just remember it being because I was in my teens. I was like 12 to 18 or whatever when I was watching it with him. I just remember the subject matter being so much deeper than a lot of other shows that are at the time, and so now I have this nostalgic remembrance of it. Because then I tried to watch like Voyager and like the other ones afterwards. I'm like. Yeah. And Voyager seemed like a space Dr. Quinn medicine woman. More than anything.
It's got a brilliant concept behind its original thing. The perfect iteration of the original idea, strange man in a strange land. What's stranger than the complete opposite end of the galaxy, 15 years away from Federation space at max warp. But they don't deal with the consequences of that. Then they turn it to make it into TNG. And it was just like, you had, I like Janeway as captain. I like the characters, but you have like these dissidents that now have to become part of the crew. They never really deal with that. They just kind of, I'm not sure what happened with the writers. They're like, oh, let's just have everyone getting along. Oh, wait, let's bring up the Maquis thing again. Okay, let's make them mad again. Let's bring it back together, work together again. And I don't know. There were good episodes in it. There were off episodes in it. It was what it was. So
I may have made a mistake by having you two on the same show together. I'm starting to realize this.
She just made it a Catholic stream. Or a Star Trek stream.
At least it's not about MASH. We didn't have like a 20-minute diatribe about MASH.
That's a good point. Okay, before we get into the actual topic, since you guys are having your nicotine, I should probably talk about our sponsored nicotine product here. Hold on, I got to pull up the script from the FDA that we have to use. But anyways, I don't like doing this. Anthony usually does this.
I'll do it.
Yeah. What? You'll do it?
I can
go for it.
I need the. Is there a script I have to read?
No, I'll say the part that we have to say. You just say whatever you want to about knick-knack.
Okay. So knick-knack, I got onto somebody because they're enjoying sucking on their lozenges, but knick-knack is a Catholic nicotine product, and so I used to use Alp because I didn't like Zen because I don't want a suppository, but I used Alp for a while, and so then I tried knickknacks. I tried the lemon is by far been my favorite. I'm doing the peppermint right now, but they're phenomenal. And I like that I don't have like a little spit wad all over the place I have to worry about. So I highly recommend them as well.
So head over to knickknack.com, use code AB25% for 25% off your first order. And we are required to say that this product contains nicotine, and nicotine is an addictive chemical. So if you're going to be addicted to it, you might as well be addicted to the Catholic version of nicotine, as well as cigars and pipes too, obviously. But and then our next and last sponsor for the night is has been one of our favorites, and that's Black Monk Rosaries. I bought my first Black Monk Rosary 6 years ago during the pandemic. Ended up giving that one away. We since bought 4 more in our household, and I got like this cool Memento Mori one. And then they have the new line of black metal rosaries too. But you could use it as a physical weapon if you wanted to. It weighs about 3 pounds, and they are indestructible. So head over to blackmonkrosaries.com.
I have the rugged rosaries, the paracord and everything.
Yeah.
My issue with them, I love my don't get me wrong, I'm not saying anything about rugged rosary, but the beads, I hate that they're plastic. I hate it.
Yeah.
Like the Our Father beads are metal, but the Aves are all plastic, and I hate that because if I did need to beat somebody to death with it, like it's going to break my rosary. I don't want that to happen.
I just have a wooden one on rope made by nuns, but I'm really interested in those Black Monk rosaries. I think I'm going to pick one up.
I do highly recommend it.
My kids break rosaries all the time. Like even the World War I replica ones that what's his name? What's the priest's name? Father Heilman does. They're
This
great,
style.
but man, yeah, they break super. In fact, I've got one for my boy. It's a gold plated one. He won it at a Troops of St. George thing we did. And the corpus from the crucifix broke off, and I had to Gorilla Glue the thing back on. But those paracord rosaries, that's really what you to be honest with you, if you're gonna have a rosary as a man, you need something that's not gonna break. So it needs to be 550 cord, or it needs to be like 12 gauge wire. Right? Because especially with boys around the house. I've got 1 boy and 3 girls. My girls still break them all the time too. But yeah, Black Monk makes some good rosaries. Maybe I'll get one day.
Like given to you?
Give me like a 50% discount or something, man.
Okay, I'll see what I can do. Okay, so I think we've taken care of all of our, let's see, we've done ad reads, we've done introductions, we've done Star Trek. So, Ryan, are we ready to get into the subject?
We are ready. Make it so.
This is all,
Nice.
You're the captain here now, bud.
That's right. As Anthony's being part of the proletariat, he's got his Mamdani bucks to take off and go for vacation.
He's got a funny story for us Tuesday, everyone. He won't tell me the whole thing, so I don't spoil it, but he did tell me that somehow while he was at the airport, he set off the fire alarm for the whole airport. Yep. He won't say how. He's going to tell that on Tuesday. But.
My goodness. All right. So on 6th April of 1453, the Turks roll up into Constantinople. And the young emperor, Mehmed II, is only about 20. And he is ready to make his mark and to show that he's fit to be the Sultan by taking the one thing that Islam has been coveting since its foundation practically, is the seizure of Constantinople. Mm-hmm. So there's a little bit of background. So Constantinople is part of what modern historians call the Byzantine Empire. They call themselves Romans because really they are Romans. They're the Eastern continuation of the Roman Empire throughout the Middle Ages, throughout pretty much all that entire time. And so with all the politics, the complications, the history of later Roman politics just plagued the city throughout that 1,000 years. But they're in dire straits because starting in the Arab conquests originally in the 7th century, and then the Battle of Manzikert, they lose a good portion of their army, and the emperor's betrayed by his pretender. So he gets captured and ransomed, but then he's gotten disposed of when he tries to go back and get the ransom paid. They're in a bad spot. The Turks have just encroached further and further. Well, the Crusades holds them up for a while. But then after the Crusades, you have two things. One, you have the fall of Constantinople in 1204 to the Latin Crusade. And that was partly due to internal Byzantine politics. There's a pretender on the throne. There's Venetian politics. That'd be another episode to talk about 1204 because it's endless subject to get into. But eventually, the Romans themselves, they get control of the city again. And the Palaeologus family, the Emperor Michael Palaeologus, they try, to have union with the Pope. But one of the sticking points is the people politics, because the French, the Angevins, they have control of various lands in Greece. They don't want to give them up, even though they belong properly to the emperor in Constantinople. So union kind of fails, and there's like a policy. They end up getting, hey, whenever you need something from the West, just profane union. And then, but now it's getting serious, with the Turks. You have Murad II, father of Mehmed, and he not only, makes conquests over in Serbia, in Bulgaria, on the other side of Constantinople, on the European side. He's threatening the city directly. So they start asking all their allies, and the Pope invites them to come to a council for reunion, because by effecting reunion, they'll have a crusade. They'll bring all kinds of forces in to defend Constantinople and whatnot. So the East, they get interested and say, okay, so they send theologians over, and the ground has been prepared over there too. You have a guy in the 1300s named Demetrius Kydonis, and he founds a school of Byzantine Thomism, where he was originally trained as a court official. He was trained in Latin, but he really likes the Latin, and he gets into reading Cicero and whatever. And so then he tries to learn more about the West in order to deal with their ambassadors. And so he's reading St. Thomas Aquinas on the question of like the filioque and other things. He's like, well, what do our theologians have to say to these arguments? So he starts kind of giving these arguments. He's getting like BS kind of stuff. There's only like one or two people who will give real theological things, and he's sifting it over. He's thinking about it. He even gets some people on his side, like Nilas Kabasi is one of the really great theologians in the Orthodox Church at that time, 1300s. He tells Kydonis, so this is Kydonis' testimony, Demetrius Kydonis. He says that Kabasi has agreed with him that, on a lot of these questions, but was afraid to say it for the opprobrium of the people, right? There's national prejudice that comes in. The Greeks just think they're better than any of the Latins at this point because of the history, the lineage, and so many things. And so, but they don't really have a good knowledge about a lot of the West. And then, it comes to, he doesn't really make the inroads he thinks he does. But the next generation, they got people like future Cardinal Bessarion, Gennadius Scholarius. You've got all these different figures that are Byzantine Thomists. They're interested in St. Thomas. And they're moving, hey, we need union with the Latins. And so the Emperor, John VIII, he thinks that, all right, now is the time. So he leaves one of his sons, Constantine, who will later become Constantine XI, to kind of manage the city. He, goes with his delegation of bishops and theologians. They go to Italy, and they end up in Florence, where you have the Council of Florence, which is called specifically for that reunion. Now, what he wants, John VIII wants military aid. He wants it now. And, the Pope at the time said, well, Nicholas V, you've got to, or was it, sorry, it was one before Nicholas V. You've got to work out the theological things first. Then we'll give all the promised aid. So they do, and it takes a painfully long time working out very complicated distinctions. You have some people like Mark of Ephesus totally against the whole thing. It'd be great to, there's another thing you could do a whole show on is the Council of Ephesus, right? But I'm sorry, the Council of Florence.
Oh.
And so, but either way, eventually union is struck. They work out difficulties in a lot of these complicated questions. Some people completely stick with it, like Bessarion, he ends up becoming part of the papal court. He ends up becoming a cardinal. He's 100% committed to reunion. But then you have other people like Gennady Scholarius who switch. A lot of them, they kind of renege on their agreement to be in union. So this becomes a problem when the Turks, they set up a base in Rumeli, which straddles, some of the Bosphorus, right, coming out of Constantinople. And they're able to basically blow up any ship that's going through there. So that's the beginning warning of, okay, this is coming down pretty soon. So the Pope tells him you need to effect the union because he's been holding off. Right, John VIII dies, his son Constantine becomes the emperor, and he's holding off on declaring union because there's a large anti-union party in Constantinople. They do not want union, and that's where the phrase, like I think it's Gennady Scholarius who declares, better the turban than the tiara, right? And it's a strong party, and he's worried. The emperor's worried about this, but he knows he's not going to get any help from the West unless he does. So finally, he invites the Pope's legate Cardinal Isidore to come in. They declare union in Hagia Sophia. They actually say mass in Hagia Sophia. So the anti-union party, they avoid the church. They won't go into the church like it's been desecrated because the Western mass has been said in there. They don't even want to go in. And it's amazing the politics and how bad it is. And you got to realize too that there is a good period, 800 years or so, of anti-Western feeling that is kind of like a tradition now that the Greeks kind of rest upon. And you have, irrespective of things they did, like when they sacked the the Venetian and Genoese trading city of Pera, completely sacked it and blinded or murdered a lot of the Latin Christians there. Or you can look that up, the massacre of the Latins. They kind of forget about that, and they just worry about 1204 when they need to get revenge for it, really. So it's in their collective psyche, the Latin kingdom of Romania, as it was called, not the actual country of Romania, the Latin control of Constantinople and its environs. They remember that, and they're not happy about that. And so all that plays in with the feeling that their leaders have betrayed the faith, that they've entered into heretical dealings with the Pope of Rome, and that's why their chant becomes better the turban than the tiara. But when Isidore proclaims union, then help starts coming, and we'll get Cardinal Isidore himself had brought in a few hundred men, munitions, money. There's others coming, and we'll get to them in a minute. On the Turkish side, so the Ottoman Turks, the Turks have been in the peninsula since in Anatolia and all these places since about the year 1000 or so, and in increasing numbers, and they had overrun what we think what used to be purely Roman territory, all of what's now Turkey, Nicaea, all these places, and they were in their control. So they had a lot of campaigns under Murad II, who is the father of the current Sultan Mehmed, and those failed because of people like John Hunyadi. We'll talk about him, other major figures that had defeated them in Serbia. So they kind of held to the territory they had, Bulgaria. And actually, I've got a map in the picture there. Yep, that's it. So they anyway. So the purple are the Roman holdings at this point. So it's just Constantinople and a bit of its environs and the lower Greek peninsula. The Ottomans have, of course, Anatolia and then the Bulgarian and Macedonian side on the European side. It's like pushing in. There's vassal states. They have they're trying to create vassal states in Romania, which at the time they collectively a couple of countries now, but Wallachia, it's parts of Hungary, Romania, and so on and so forth. They're just pushing themselves and getting, and of course, most of Europe is totally oblivious to the threat of the Ottoman Empire. The French and the English are fighting the 100 Years' War. Italy, there's constant warfare in Italy. The Italian trading states have, they're not terribly worried about Christian unity or repelling the Turk. They're more worried about what kind of trade contracts they can get with the Turks in order to increase their profits. The Germans have their own problems. You have the Hussites. You have all these different, problems in flashpoints in Europe itself. So no one's really, there's a lot of humanists that say, hey, we got to defend Constantinople. They reach back to antiquity, the city of Constantine. And then there's a lot of people like, yeah, but, I got to go fight my neighbor over in the other village. There's just not, it's not a thing that's getting Europe together. The Pope had actually declared a crusade when after Florence, when the East had come back into union. And it doesn't actually amount to very much. They end up fighting the Turks at Varna, and they're there, which is a little bit north of where you see the Ottoman line at the top left. And of course, the Turks end up defeating them very soundly. Nobody really musters up the forces. The Hungarians are, Hunyadi is the protector of Hungary, because the actual king is kind of a hostage in the house of the Holy Roman Emperor, Frederick III. So Hunyadi has got to manage the country, defend it against a potential Turkish assault. He's not really in a position to come down to Constantinople. And, none of the other powers are. We'll mention some of them after, like Skanderbeg, and, how some of that, develops. But in the meantime, you have Mehmed. Now, trained since birth as, to be like classically trained. So he learns Latin, he learns Greek, as well as, classical Arabic, because the Turks don't speak Arabic. Prayers are done in Arabic. They don't really know it. He learns, he's very well cultured, and he styles himself like a Caesar. That's how he thinks of himself, because where is his capital? It's in lands that they called Rome, right? Because it used to be part of the Roman Empire back in the day. The Turks see them, increasingly the Ottomans, I should say, have seen themselves as like heirs to the Roman Empire. And so the Sultan now wants to become true Caesar by occupying the very city of the Romans itself, Constantinople. And so this is why, he's only 20. He needs to make his mark somewhere. Already, his father tried to retire and put him on the throne as a child, and the Janissaries didn't really like it. A lot of the court nobles were threatening rebellion. Hey, he doesn't know what he's doing. We can't do this. So he's got that in the background. Now he's solely in charge, and he needs to solidify his power, because court intrigue in the Ottoman Empire is endemic. And a history of the Ottoman Empire, there's so much court intrigue, whether through the harem or through nobles to Janissary rebellions. You get a couple of those, all kinds of crazy stuff. So he's got to fend all this stuff off. But, so he can continue the wars of his father, but Constantinople is just sitting there. And as you saw on the map, it's like this little sea within this otherwise Ottoman, control. Why not take it? And so that's what he plans to do. So him and Constantine are sent. He actually says to Constantine, you can go down to Mistra, down in the Greek peninsula where it was still purple there in the map. You can it had very nice villas. It had, places where he could live in state as the Roman emperor still. And Mehmed would have allowed it. At least he said he would. All kinds of things. And Constantine is like, no, it is not. I have no authority to give up the city, because it is Christ and the Theotokos who are in charge of the city, and the emperors are really just servants for it all. So that's why he can't just give it up. So there's negotiating back and forth. He has a pretender to the Ottoman throne that he's keeping safe in the city. He threatens to let him out. Mehmed responds by cutting off the heads of his emissaries and sending him back to Constantine. So now it's like, okay, it's on. So he starts begging, for more help. Italian ships start showing up, Venetian ships, Genoese ships, and probably most importantly, the most important fellow in this whole story is a guy named Giovanni Giustiniani Longo. So Giustiniani, he's Genoese. He's a brilliant commander, mercenary commander largely, but he has an effective team of extremely well-armed mercenaries, a few thousand, a lot of, experience with gunpowder, crossbows, cannons. They bring in a lot of cannon. They help really fortify the city. He's welcome. Constantine trusts him implicitly and makes him the head of the defense. So they start, immediately rebuilding the trenches and then refortifying the walls. Now, this is the most important thing. The walls are, they're called the Theodosian walls, because they were built up by the Emperor Theodosius II to deter Attila the Hun, right? Or originally they were built up and then refortified later, but that's what the purpose was. And of course, throughout the Middle Ages, they're being strengthened and reworked, and really impressive system. Is covering like 5.5 miles on the land side, and then even more than that on the ocean side. They're just huge, almost impregnable. And that's the question: can you beat the walls? So while Mehmed's working on this problem, a guy shows up. He says, "Oh, I can help you with this problem." And his name's Orban, and he's a Hungarian. Now, he had gone to Constantine and said, "Hey, I'll build cannons for you to defend the city." And Constantine says, "Great, but I got spiders in my wallet, dude. I don't have any money." Orban says, okay, thanks. I'll find someone else. So he goes over to Mehmed instead and says, hey, I'll make you cannons and take down the city. He's definitely working for whatever coin he can get. And he casts for Mehmed, if you want to put the cannon picture up, a massive cannon. This is called the basilisk. So gunpowder in this time, we talked about this, I think, the last time I was on, or a time before that with Lepanto on the matchlocks and that sort of thing. You have the matchlock around at this time, or the arquebus, but you don't have like really effective gunpowder yet, because there's a technique that they will learn in about 40 years, soaking gunpowder. And then there's a technical term for this, and I don't remember what it's called. You soak it, and then you form it into like cakes and patties, and then you grind it back down into powder. And something about this increases the kinetic energy of gunpowder. I don't know what it is because I'm not a chemist, or I can't remember the terms for that. But that hasn't been discovered yet. So the gunpowder in this time is a lot weaker than it will be in the 1500s. So your cannons, to get more power, it's going to be, yeah, that's right. They got to be bigger.
We learned our lesson there.
Yeah, that's right. So Orban, he casts this thing for Mehmed II, and this thing is massive. You see all the men that have to operate it. I believe they're picturing Orban there in the green, looking at it and making directions. But either way, it has to be lifted with a crane in order to be moved, and it only fires 7 times a day. So it's not terribly efficient, except in one factor: it's really loud. And the psychological factor of it all is would prove to be very overwhelming. So,
and was this cast in bronze still at this point?
This one was cast in iron.
Okay.
Which is part of the reason what will happen to it later, as we'll get into. It takes a long time to cool down. There's other cannons cast like that are not quite as large as this, but very big. And then he has regular ones. So on the 6th of April, there's another picture in there. I think the third one in. So the 6th of April, Mehmed rolls up, and so you've got the city there as it would appear, and so you've got the Golden Horn on the right, the channel that flows between Constantinople, and then on the other bank is Pera, the Genoese trading city. So formally, they had preached a truce with it. They told the Turks, "Hey, we're not going to interfere." But there's one thing they did as a defensive thing. There's a chain that they would stretch across the strait and connect it to both cities to keep ships from getting through. And so that way that, the Turks wouldn't be able to fully, surround the city. But otherwise, they wouldn't give any material help, because they had to try to run with the foxes and the hounds on this one, because their fate was uncertain if the Turks win and uncertain if they lose. And so they're kind of working both sides as best they can. You got the Ottoman ships that are trying to form their blockade, and then you can see the sea walls very clearly. So Mehmed he has his fleet tighten up the sea walls to try to prevent, any aid from going into the city. Then on the landward side, he sets up all of his troops in a circumvallation of the city, with the cannons mostly concentrated on the center. I should have had another graphic for the siege. Maybe I can find one. But in the meantime, he sets up all his cannons, facing the landward side, and they start firing on 6th April. They start blasting off. So one of the things that Justiniani gets the men doing is they lower cushions onto the forward walls, so that a lot of the cannonballs will bounce off, right? And so they create these cushions, and then lower them down, catch a lot of that. And so it starts off, but the pressure from the guns is a lot. But this siege will end up going on for a month and a half. It's going to be, a long time. But it continues. So in the city, there's still problems like the anti-Latin party is heckling the people that are defending the city. That's one of the things they have to contend with. They have, food rationing. They had food stored up, but as would turn out, not nearly enough. And the Turks then, on top of the guns, they send in sappers. They get, miners going that are, and they're moving their trench. One of the things the Turks developed in this period is trench warfare. So long before, you get to World War I, they actually created the notion of digging trenches for your men and hiding your troops there. And so they're able to start advancing these a little bit more and a little bit more. And, as the weeks roll on, the defenders would make a sortie, right? And so if you're not hopefully that's a common enough term. Everyone should know what that is.
Sortie, yeah.
Yeah, and so French word for exit, literally, or make our way out. And so there were various gates all along, even the landward side. And so at different times, they would arrange a sortie and come out either with cavalry or on foot. And, it attacked the Turks when they would get too close to the walls, sometimes to push some of their earthworks back and then get right back into the city. But it's still, a devastating psychological impact as the siege continues through April. So, but on the Turkish side, Mehmed's, got problems too, because, as every reverse they get, the morale is, kind of, dropping. And, if he doesn't, make good and get the city, he's pretty much not going to keep his throne. And he knows that. So he moves the guns closer to the Romanus Gate, which is more in the center of Constantinople, and he starts blasting in that area. And that's, what he's working on. Meanwhile, while that happens, he hears about a relief force. There's a Genoese fleet, about, not a huge one, about 5 or so ships. And they've got also a Byzantine cargo ship, bringing food, military supplies, troops. And so the Ottomans, remember, they've got it blocked off. And so they have the wind, the weather gauge. So they're just flying right in, these Italian ships. And they're bigger than the Turkish vessels. So you have the similar thing we were talking about with Lepanto, right? And so they move in, and the Turks, try to intercept them. They're able to blow past a good deal of the Turkish fleet, but then they get stuck. And so so it's a massive battle. The wind dies, and it looks like the Turks are finally going to prevail when the wind picks up again, fills their sails, and then they're able to push through the Turkish blockade. The chain opens up, and they enter the Golden Horn, and and so then Mehmed is pissed. So he gets his captain, and instant death is the judgment for his admiral. And I can't remember the guy's name off the top of my head right now. I believe like Baltalu or all the Turkish names are harder for him. I believe it's Baltalu or Baltalu or something like that. His men speak up for him and say, hey, he fought bravely. Look how wounded he is. And Mehmed is like, all right, just beat him within an inch of his life and take all his treasure and send him out in exile. So, almost as bad as killing him. He is just pissed. So he's got to figure out how to deal with this business of the chain, right? And so what he comes up with, a really ingenious plan. He waits a little bit to unfurl it, but what he'll do is from the landward side, he'll have his ships transported to, it'd sail around the other side of the landward side through the Black Sea, and then he would just transport his ships by land, and drop them into the Golden Horde behind the chain. Make the chain, totally useless. So now his ships can have that full surrounding of every area of sea, which also blockades in the Venetian ships, so they can't escape if they were going to try to. They do try to tell Constantine at different points, hey, you're emperor, you need to leave. And I think it's very heroic in Constantine. And it's funny because he's a Hunyad. He's committed to the principle of union with Rome. So he's been getting, nothing but hate from the anti-Latin party for a long time. But, in the presence of the patriarch and everyone else, he declares that he will not even consider leaving the city because that, it is his fate to be the last emperor of the Theotokos city. And he will die here with all of them. And he does. He mans the walls. He gets into the thick of the fighting when at different times the Turks will breach in May. And so it's, he does try to lift the morale quite a bit whenever he can. So he's like one of the few really admirable people on the Greek side during all this. And anyway, so the siege goes on. Do you have any questions? Because I'm kind of moving on to like a loose reconstruction of it.
Just some like things that not really questions, but I just kind of see the foreshadowing of some techniques we still use in war, right? Like the sortie has now become what's called the QRF, the quick reaction force, right? So when I was in Afghanistan, if somebody needs some help, we always had guys on standby, whether it's a platoon size or whatever, that would go out and help real quick and be able to get right back. But I'm also thinking about carrying those boats. Because I've carried the Zodiac before, and that thing will, even if you got 20 other dudes carrying that thing, it will humble you. And that's a rubber boat, right? So I couldn't imagine carrying a wooden boat across to land in behind lines, in the horn there. But
Yeah, let me find a picture of it. But it was a huge process. Now the Vikings did stuff like that, but their boats were a lot smaller, and they were actually designed for them to be able to use that tactic whenever they could. Dang it! I'm just trying to find. Let me just take rid of that. All right. That looks about right. There we go. That's 16th century. That's close enough. Let me see. Open image. New tab. There we go. I'll just share that. Good grief. Working with the technology here. There we go. If you put that up, there we go. So that's about the size boat. So I mean, he's got a massive army at his disposal, so he can manage that. And I should mention something too about the Turkish army. So he's got his navy, and they sail in dhows like this, and a lot of men on the oars. Not too much dissimilar from an Italian style galleon that had been used pretty much since Roman times. The only difference being the addition of cannon, and they're a lot lower than the Italian ships, which makes them a little bit faster, but also limits some of their effectiveness at different stages. They have some bigger ones too when they need them, but that's what they bring over across into the Golden Horn. So the Turkish armies, I've got a picture of a Turkish Janissary if you want to bring that one. There we go. So the Janissaries, we mentioned them in the Lepanto episode. That the Janissaries are mostly taken from Christian parents. They're kids. They're taken when they're kids or ordered as tribute, and then they would be, castrated, forcibly converted to Islam, and then raised as as Muslims. And they would be elite warriors, and they would be trained in all manner. And the Janissaries were with sword fighting, spear, cannonade, cavalry, you name it. They've got all these different tactics that they're able to master. They're really elite soldiers, the elite guard for the Sultan. Yet the mainstay of his armies, though, at Constantinople, was Anatolian infantry. So Anatolian infantry, these are people that once upon a time fought in Byzantine armies, and now they're attributed, from Cappadocia, from Ankara, from all these different areas. I mean, men, they'd fight with axes, they'd fight with spears. They largely brought their own, weapons. So it's like you've got your professional army, and then you've got your wider conscripted army. Yeah, you just can't afford that professional army. It's that big at this stage of the world. So so that's largely the armies. I mean, massively outnumbered. You only have about 7,000 defenders really in Constantinople. So at the same time. But
how would the defenders in Constantinople have been armed? What sort of troops were they largely?
So a lot of them were Italian mercenaries. They would have crossbows, arquebus. They had cannons. They did have some Greek fire, but they saved that for very specific targeted operations. Like they would try to burn the boats one time. That actually didn't work for them. Another time they would burn, siege equipment and earthworks, sally out at a sortie and throw the Greek fire and burn up some stuff and go back. But otherwise, mostly pike and shot, axes, or swords as the main weapons. But from the chroniclers and what they write about the both sides of it, there don't seem to be a lot of any specific order, because you're working in a very narrow space. It's like the same principle, like trying to get someone to fight to ford a river, or somewhere. Kill them in small numbers when they come across that bridge or over that ford, going through like a breach in the wall. That's where most of the fighting takes place, unless it was in a mine that they had discovered underneath. It's really just the worst of hand-to-hand combat with whatever you got to do the most effective thing. You might start out with an efficient pike wall as the Turks are trying to enter, and they'll try to take it down with some shots on their way in, with supporting fire for the Anatolian infantry coming from the Janissaries in the back or something. But then, once the melee happens, it's knives, it's axes, the bottom of your axe, halberds, swords, whatever it is that you've got at hand, that's the most effective. You might not be able to move your halberd just because your own people. So you've got a knife because it's actually more effective getting in and slicing. And any of these fights, like almost any hand-to-hand combat, they're lasting 2 to 6 seconds, and you've killed the man, and eventually you've got to back out yourself to retire, and other people will come up and take your place because you're in such a tight-knit spot fighting at the breach. So the guns do breach the walls a couple times in May, and so what Justiniani would have them do is after they repel the assault, is they'd build up a bunch of earthworks to try to patch up the walls best they could. So then, Mehmed would redirect the guns as best he could. So that now that one, so remember that Hungarian who switched to help out the Turks, Mehmed wants that basilisk going. He wants it like 20 times a day, not 7 times a day. So Orban's trying to get it, redirected. He's trying to get it loaded again, and it doesn't have enough time to cool down. So I believe it's like the 4th or the 5th of May. I might be wrong on the date. It blows up and also kills Orban. So he gets his reward for helping out the Sultan, who commanded him on pain of death. You keep this thing going, even though he knows it's probably going to blow up. Not a good thing for him, but they do, the defenders, they got problems. Their defense is starting to break up. Everyone's kind of getting mad at each other, and you still have Greeks are accusing the Latins of not really fighting hard enough. You have quarrels over supplies, over stores, over food. They want to get supplies from the Venetian ships, and which is agreed to. But then the Venetians like, no, you're not taking our ships, and we want a way out of here if this all goes south. And eventually they're compelled to give up their arms and goods out of the ships and give it over to the defense. But there's a lot of grumbling. No one's really happy. There's bad omens. They do a procession with the Higerta, this icon of the Theotokos, that they processing through the city. And then it's raining, and this happens in May. And while they're processing, the icon falls from its perch, and they have a moment where they can't get it out of the mud. It was very heavy. It was encrusted with gold and other stones and whatnot, but even so, they can't get it out of the mud. Finally, they're able to get it up, but people kind of see this as the omen, the city's going to fall. And on top of that, on 13th May, there's a crescent moon, right, which the Turks are very excited by, but everyone in the city is like, oh no, this is it. So we just skip closer to the end. So about the 28th, Mehmed pushes really hard for the final assault, and so they get their preparations ready. Hagia Sophia, all the people flee there, so you have both Catholic and Orthodox together in the church praying, and most of the people hoping, praying that an angel will come deliver them, from the Turkish host. They say Vespers there. It's the last service, Christian service is done in Hagia Sophia. And then 29th May, the offensive begins, and they send in their kind of peasant armies, their conscripts, whatever, to be, picked off by guns and killed by the troops. Then they send in the Anatolian infantry, and they're kind of the more battle-hardened troops in Mehmed's army. And so, but they get pushed back. Unfortunately, what happens is that Justiniani gets wounded. And he's the guy who's kept the morale up, who's kept the fighting up. He is like just absolute Chad, keeping this hopeless thing going. And he gets wounded. And so his men want to take him back to his ship, and which Constantine consents to. But without him, you're kind of leaderless. On top of that, there's a gate on the, if I'm not mistaken, the southwestern side is it's called the Circus Gate, the Kerka. And what happens is that when the troops were making a sortie out of there, they didn't sufficiently lock it up. And so and because there's not enough defenders to cover even all the land walls. And so the Turks are prodding and poking in different places. So some Janissaries get in, and they even take part of the wall. So this creates more confusion as the Janissaries are making that final push through this breach in the wall, which almost gets repelled. But then, the defenders, they see the Turkish standards up on one of the towers. They see what's going on. And the Janissaries are able to push their way through, and the defense just melts away. Constantine, he gets all of anything that might identify him as the emperor. He strips that off him. And then he draws his sword. He charges in. He's never seen again. And the Greeks actually had legends long after it, 100, 200 years after this, of Constantine coming again to free them up from Turkish slavery and whatnot. Which is funny because he dies fully in union with Rome, and that part, all the legends, I kind of forget about that part. but just his heroism, it's so well remembered. It's part of it. But after that, the defense just melts away. and Mehmed's troops were able to overwhelm the city and so on. But this is also the city he wants to make his capital. So he actually breaks the Islamic tradition on this thing and orders his troops to stop the plunder and stop the sack, which is done with, a lot of consternation, but they eventually do it because he doesn't want his new capital to be like burnt to the ground. So the Justiniani's troops actually take him by boat out of the city. They manage to break the Turkish blockade, but he dies on route, I think, on Chios. Actually, never really makes it back home to Genoa, just from the wound he got. And on top of that, many others died there. I didn't even mention the mines. It was probably just as well as I already got to the end. But there were mining operations. There's actually a guy named Grant who was a Scottish engineer. And I always wonder, I wonder if there's a relation there. It probably is. But, anyway, so he's the one who kind of discovered the mines throughout that, and of course, would lead to more horrific fighting once they discovered those or used chemical warfare, burn some kind of gas, whatever, to smoke the Turks out and things like that. So, but, no one knows what happens to him in the whole business. Family members of the empire, they had already actually made their way out. And you can actually look up what happened to the Paleologus after Constantinople fell. So one of them, of course, marries into the Russian royal family. It's how the Russians styled themselves as the Third Rome, right? Some of them go to Italy. Thomas, who is Constantine's older brother, actually, or younger brother, I can't remember the order there. He ends up in Italy. And he ends up being styled by the Pope, the new Emperor of Constantinople, like just an empty title. He doesn't have enough money. He's a spendthrift. The guy ends up dying penniless, right? And there's a lot of other stories about the Paleologus who survived the fall. But anyway, the result is Constantinople falls, and now Mehmed's finally got his prize, which is almost in messianic terms for Muslims, because the Al-Hadith, all these Islamic texts talk about the importance of Constantinople. The early successors of Muhammad tried it, unsuccessfully to take it in the 700s, and there was another siege. They'd failed completely to take it. So now they finally have it. And this, of course, solidifies, remember that map earlier, Constantinople was that one purple spot in the middle. Now it's all Ottoman. And now they've got a nice centralizing place that straddles most of the trade routes in the world to start looking to the west. And Hungary is kind of on the road to where they want to go, which is Venice and Rome. Principally, those are the principal targets that they're now aiming for. But Hungary is in the crosshairs. I don't know if they have any more comments or the questions that people want to answer, because then.
So yeah, we have a couple questions. So it is, for the most part, assumed that Constantine died in that battle.
Yes, all sides agree, but his body was never found.
Okay.
But
which leads to the legends that you said.
Right. Leads into the legends, but he almost certainly died there, because if they found him either alive or, he would have been a trophy piece in one way or the other,
right,
for the Sultan. His body was found, they would have hoisted it up, and there's but they never found it. They couldn't identify it.
And then the question here, wasn't there a vote to reunite with at this time the East had reunified with Rome, at least according to the vote of like the patriarchs and even
the emperor and the patriarch, but not the people. And so the people rioted over it. They were that's what created the anti-Latin party, and headed by Gennadius Scholarius. So Mehmed brings him in, says, "Hey, so I heard you were really against union with the Pope." "Oh, absolutely. And I hear, you are preferable to the reign of the tiara." I said, "Oh, yes." I said, "All right, how would you like to be the next patriarch of the next ecumenical patriarch?" He says, "Well, that's wonderful. I'd love that. Just kind of give over one of your sons for me to sodomize a little bit." He does it.
That's on brand.
So Scholarius, is such an interesting, figure otherwise, because, like I said, he was a Byzantine Thomist, and he even said that even after all this, that he still revered St. Thomas. He said, yes, the only thing the Blessed Thomas got wrong was the filioque and the energy's essence question, and that was the only thing he felt that Thomas was wrong about. Even as now this vassal for this, because what happens is the ecumenical patriarch, the Turks, that's what really finishes the union between East and West. Is that the Turks is now part of politics to keep the Eastern patriarchate from ever being unified to the Pope. So that in the Eastern Church in general, they want to see it completely severed and a creature of their own control.
Mm-hmm.
And so, with Rome would always be bad for that. So they don't want that to happen. And ecumenical patriarchs at different times, like during the Greek Revolution in the 1800s, they took the ecumenical patriarch and they told him to tell the people to stop, and he refused to do it. So they shot him and hung his corpse, over the walls. And it was pretty dangerous being the ecumenical patriarch under the Turks, almost as much as being under the Byzantine emperors. But that's another story if you want to dig into the history of Byzantium more. But
so kind of that whole question of union kind of leads to the questions like at least a few of the guys we're probably going to talk about here now, like Vlad, Dracul, and Skanderbeg. Like, are they more properly considered like Eastern Orthodox heroes or Catholic heroes?
Skanderbeg was Catholic. At first, at a certain point, he was Muslim and it was a vassal for the Turks. And then, he completely switched but he converted to Catholicism. And whether that was mere personal politics, because that would guarantee help from the West, or that was a serious movement of belief, I can't tell, but he certainly persevered in the Catholic faith. So even, when he got in the War of Venice and things like that. So Dracul, so Vlad Tepes, we should probably mention Hunyadi a little bit. So all throughout the siege of Constantinople, the Turks were nervous that Hunyadi was going to march against them. Now, Hunyadi had given massive defeats to the Emperor Murad, or the Sultan Murad, right? It was Mehmed's father. So, and of course now he's had to step down as protector of Hungary because Ladislaus the king has now come back and taken up his throne, but he's still the captain formally of all the military guard. He's got way too much power, too much nobility just to be gotten rid of. And so he sees what happens in Constantinople. So he starts fortifying for more battle with the Turks. Hunyadi is such an interesting figure, very underrated general. He had actually been a knight in the train of the Emperor Sigismund III. And that's where he had gotten a lot of his battle experience. And he had spent a lot of time learning from, Italian generals who had been fighting for a long time, learned a lot of different tactics and techniques. So, he's just, the Turks still feared his name. As he's preparing, he meets this Franciscan, and they'd met before at different times. They were working out like the Crusade in Varna and stuff like that. Saint Giovanni Capistrano. And Capistrano he's a Franciscan, brilliant missionary preacher. He's preached all throughout Italy. Big friend of Saint Bernardine of Siena. He he's responsible largely for Saint Bernardine's canonization, because for a lot of reasons there were people that didn't like this idea, this devotion to the holy name. Thought it was too weird. And Pope Pius II, had opened the cause, and they got a lot of people inveighing against canonizing Bernardine of Siena. So Capistrano it shows up and will start preaching for 2 hours on some miracle of a missing chicken having been found or some other thing. Like, he's propounded, 10,000 miracles attributed to St. Bernardine of Siena. I would own probably only about 100 of them were actually somewhat miraculous, but it didn't matter. So eventually Pope Pius II, he'll have some jokes, troll John Capistrano a little bit. Capistrano get mad, get really pissed off. He says, no, relax. I'm listening. And finally, just to get Capistrano to shut up, he says, all right, I'm going to canonize them. We'll call these good. No more 10,000 lists of miracles, and let's just canonize them, and so you can go on your way. He gets sent to Bohemia, where he does a lot of preaching against the Hussites, especially against Utraquism. And that's, since we mentioned the Orthodox, that's probably Utraquism is a big thing for the Hussites. The idea that denying the faithful the chalice at communion was denying them part of the body of Christ. The host wasn't sufficient. So he preaches a lot against that sort of thing. But I actually have a book on St. John Capistrano. If you want to get into, goes into a lot of the detail. Very well written history of him. But otherwise, he starts preaching the crusade, and he goes into places in Hungary, Bohemia. He's just preaching in Latin because he doesn't know those languages. Now in Bohemia, there were a lot of people who knew Latin just for trade and other things, because there's a couple of different dialects you got to deal with there. But Hungary, well, not so much. And people said, what's he saying? I don't know. There's something about fighting. Hey, I'm in. And here's something in Latin. You have my pitchfork. You have my axe. So he gets this army, largely of peasants, and whips them up into this halfway disciplined and decent army. Nothing near like with Turkish regulars or anything like that. So Hunyadi desperately needs men. So, they come and join this crusade. And the big thing that's happening now is Belgrade. So Belgrade sits on a little peninsula where the Danube meets the Skara? No. It's I can't remember the river that it meets. Really important spot. And it will continue to be actually for a couple hundred years. And what Constantinople was to Europe generally, holding back the Turks, Belgrade is to Hungary specifically, holding back the Turks. So so Mehmed decides to roll up, a lot like he did with Constantinople, tries to blockade the river all around the Danube, and then he has a land wall, this circumvallation around the city. And so now, so Hunyadi's, what wasn't prepared for it.
Yeah, it's the Sava River.
His own ideas of how to raise them. So he gets going, and he actually gets ships, all these merchant ships that he's kind of refitted with cannon. And he goes to break the Turkish blockade of the Danube. The Turkish blockade of the Danube was set up by chaining a bunch of those galleys together so that, nobody could get through. So Hunyadi's men get in there, and they have a hard-fought thing with their cannon. They're fighting, but eventually they're able to, kill all the Turkish ships. They, kill the Turkish sailors, and he's able to get through and land right into Belgrade, right in front of the Turkish lines. They can't do anything about it, with troops, supplies that they desperately needed. So in Belgrade is set up. I wish I had a map of it. I should have thought about getting a map of Belgrade, but it's got towers and walls, lowers. This is before star forts and before they had really taken account of gunpowder in the construction of forts. But just the same, cannons aren't really powerful to bring down the walls just like that. It takes a long time. So there's lower fields of walls, and then there's upper ones, and then the main citadel, which is also part cathedral. And Hunyadi is, now in the city waiting, for the Turks. The Turks do manage to breach the walls, and he sets up a couple of death traps for them as they're going through the cities. They're marching up into Belgrade. There we go. Actually, you know what that's from? That's the thumbnail for a really good video on this whole subject by, I watched it a while ago. San Roman History. Yes, San Roman History is the channel. Very underrated historical channel. So if you Sand H Roman or Sand Roman with an H after the R, I think it's like that. He's not a native English speaker, so sometimes they'll make fun of his messing up certain English words, but he does a great job with these animations and things. But yeah, you can see, Belgrade there. So Hunyadi, lets the Turks breach the walls at certain points without trying to reinforce this. He wants them to come in. So he set up a death trap for him. They're going to march in, and he's pulled the troops back. There's like a token force to egg them on to go through the breach. Then meanwhile, his men, light some pitch, and they set up fires to cut off part of the Turkish army from the other group that's come in. And then he hits them at two sides, and he swings down with his cavalry from the citadel and just utterly smashes them, and they run a retreat from the city. And they try to breach a few more times, and again, he totally crushes them. And so now he's trying to prepare an even stronger assault. And then all of a sudden, the Turks their cavalry retreats, and the men seem to disappear. So some of the people in the city say, "Yay!" and they start to go out to plunder. And Hunyadi says, "No, don't do it," because he's smart enough to know this is just a ruse. They want them out of the city to a pitched battle. Well, the men obey Hunyadi, but then the peasant crusade under Capistrano that's hanging in reserve outside the city, they see it, and they say, "Hey, we should go plunder the Turkish camp. Look, there's even a few stragglers out there doing it." So they go to join that. When that happens, the Turkish infantry joins it. So, Hunyadi is in like a difficult spot because they're all going to get slaughtered by Turkish regulars. He doesn't want to see all that death happening. So even though it's not what he meant to do, this is a lot like Helm's Deep, actually. he rides out. He makes a sortie from the city, rides out with the full army to go fight the Ottoman infantry. And on top of that, the cavalry fails to show back up. So the Turkish cavalry does not reappear in the battlefield. So Hunyadi's men completely break the Turkish lines. Mehmed sees that and he tries to rally them to fight with them directly. The guy's got some, personal courage. And then he gets shot in the thigh with an arrow. So he's got to withdraw. And, the sight of the Sultan coming away wounded, the morale drops. And Hunyadi utterly crushes and routs the rest of the Turks. They clean up the cavalry when they do finally materialize. And they save Belgrade. And it's not terribly long after that, though, that Hunyadi dies. The Turks actually have writings about a wizard amongst this group of peasants that were fighting with them. In other words, Capistrano, because he appeared with the banner and with the name of Christ on it, and they were terrified, and they thought it was like a wizard directing the people on. Right? They're utterly terrified of him. So that was, Hunyadi, and that, galvanizes, support in Europe. People are hopeful that, the Turk actually can be fought. He's not utterly invincible. And then we get to Dracula. So Dracula, his dad is Dracul II, Vlad Dracul II. So he sends his son, the future Vlad III, as a hostage down to the Turks.
With his brother, right?
With his brother. And he was treated fairly cruelly. And on top of that, he witnessed the Turks just doing horrible, horrible executions to people, traitors, to criminals, and other things. Impaling being among them, beheadings, all choppings of hands, all these different things. And so he's kept a memory of that as well as the brutality. So his father and brother are killed, and so the Turks then install him in Wallachia as the client. They're kind of their king, and he's playing the part for the moment. And now on top of that, Wallachia and Hungary are not always allied. So Hunyadi actually invades Wallachia. Vlad escapes to Moravia, but then, some relatives attempt to kill him out there. So he ends up fleeing back to Hunyadi. Hunyadi, receives him, and he's really impressed with the guy's knowledge of the Turks and their tactics and so many things. And so they go to common accord. Vlad goes back to Romania. And this is kind of there's all kinds of stories about Vlad the Impaler. I don't know how many of it are true. Some of them should be, but one of the things he wanted Romania to be less poor, more affluent. Notice there's all these beggars, and there's all these lepers and diseased people, and what do we do about all that? So, according to this one story, he invites them all to a massive barn that he's had to refit and gives them a tremendous banquet. And they're all eating, they're thankful, and then he says, "What else could I do to?" And they said, "Well, it'd be great if we weren't poor and you weren't diseased." And he says, "Well, God will solve all of these problems." So he goes out the door, he locks it, and he has the thing burned down. They're not poor anymore. They're not hungry anymore. They're not diseased anymore. Problem solved. And I don't know if that story is true or not, but it is a real, good depiction of his character. And so he refuses to pay the Sultan tribute. The Sultan sends a small army, figures that's all he needs to deal with them. And Vlad, kills them through guerrilla tactics, has all the survivors impaled. Now, impalement, you think, oh yeah, it's just run a spike up somebody and they die and that's it. No. He was very expert at this. So this is where he gets more PG-13 or R, I guess. But what you do, well, basically you sodomize this guy with this stake that you're impaling him on, right? And you lay him over and hit it in with a hammer. And somebody who's extremely well skilled with this will miss all the viscera, come up for the neck, and somewhere up here, missing all your internal organs, and and so you're sitting on this pole, which will be greased, and you could sit there for days. Horrible pain. And the only thing that would kill you quicker is if it rained, and then you'd get gangrene. The wounds would be gangrenous, and you'd die. That was, this is pretty gruesome way. So he'd actually created a forest around the capital of dead Turks. From that, yep. And so, and then he adds to it through various campaigns. And so, Mehmed, he sends his messengers again and says, "Please, wouldn't you consider doing your duty to the Sultan, because Mehmed's dealing other stuff. He's dealing with another campaign for Hungary, and this is where you get the Hungarians are marshaling. You have the creation of the Black Army, right, which is another fabled military unit created by Matthew Corvinus. If you've seen a certain movie, The Father of Us All, right, but he was neither a wolf nor a vampire. He was so the way he fought. I didn't know I was going to go there today.
Talking about Underworld. Love it.
But yeah, Michael Corvinus, he steps into the story, around this time, right? But anyway, so Mehmed's had Vlad in Constantinople. He just wants to stop this guy and buy him off somehow. He says, wouldn't you just pay a little tribute to the Sultan and you'll be rewarded in all these ways? And so he tells the emissaries, yes, I will do service to the Sultan. I will come with my treasury and my men, and I will do service for him. And then it's a Mehmed's like, great. So he commands everyone when Vlad's army comes through, you're just going to let him in. And so he does. And so he moves into Turkish Bulgaria, goes in, past, quite a bit of Turkish territory. And he stops at a certain point and says, right, all right, we've done some service. Now we got a little more to do. Turns around, raids everything in sight, sacks and destroys cities and towns, takes Turkish captives back, and all the way back into Romania. So Mehmed hears this, and he is just livid. So he assembles a massive army, marches up into Romania, and then according to a Greek chronicler, Decos of I'm trying to remember the names. I haven't looked in this history in a long time. He describes Mehmed being there. I'm not sure the historians divided whether he was actually there or not. But either way, the Turks see this forest of all their impaled countrymen and also criminals. Vlad did not like criminals. He didn't like thieves. And so he had them impaled too. So
wasn't tough on crime.
Thousands of people impaled, the rotting bodies up there. Birds have made nests in their entrails and all this type of thing. Just horrid stuff. And Mehmed is described to have been so demoralized just by the sight of it. He just takes the army and goes back. Just utterly, vicious. And so Vlad, for all his cruelty, kept the Turks out, kept Romania free for a while.
Mm-hmm. What's the most likely number for the number of people in the Forest of the Impaled?
I don't know, because
I've heard upward of 20,000, but
yeah, 20, 30,000 could have been a lot less than that. Could have looked. I mean, if you're looking at thousands of people up on spikes, who knows?
Yeah,
it's hard to, it's hard to quantify. I don't know. There's no numbers from the time that tell about it, but it was well known. And if you were in Romania, I mean, you did not. You'd see gold that you knew it was Dracula's gold. You didn't touch it. There's actually a story about a merchant that had left his gold in his cart, and somebody had stolen it. And so he reports this to Vlad, and Vlad says it sends people out to look for whoever stole it. So they find the guy, find his gold. So Vlad does a little trick. Right, he adds 3 coins into the gold, and he returns it to the merchant. So the merchant's counting it, and he says, "Well, your lord, my liege, there's more gold here than I had." So he returns the gold that wasn't his, and Vlad, claps his hand and says, "I like you. If you had claimed all the gold, that pike over there, I would have impaled you on it." He hated thieves. So basically, if you saw gold and it was Dracula's gold, you just didn't touch it.
I mean, with this, whenever I read these histories, it brings about how violent the world has been,
mm-hmm.
and what a time of just aversion to violence we're in now.
Right.
And we, and maybe that's due to how soft we are. People don't even know where their food comes from anymore. Like, we've got people who think, food just shows up at the grocery store and that's it. Right. And people are just not aware or even accustomed to just seeing blood.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I can tell you times when I was working on the fire department on the med unit that I'd have a trainee with me who the first time he sees a guy's tib fib broken and it's an open fracture and there's blood everywhere and they pass out. Like, they just
Right.
can't stand the sight of blood. But the amount of violence that people were willing to do to protect their people. What side you were on, it didn't matter.
Right.
It just people are not prepared for that now,
Mhm.
which means when we return to the old rules, it's going to be shocking for some people.
We will not be ready. Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, because I mean, we live soft lives, happy lives, largely unmolested by war. I mean, if you live in cities, you got a little bit closer with crime and judges letting these psychopaths back on the streets to do more crime and things like that. But like where I live, you're not going to come do crime where I live because every single house has man or teenager that's going to use his 2A to end you. I'm trying to think of a way I could put this on YouTube. That's just it. So I know even though I'm pseudo academic, soft life. I mean, I've had animals, I've butchered animals, and the first time was actually hard for me.
Yeah.
I was raised suburbanite kid, New England. Slitting a lamb's throat. It's not something that comes naturally, but you do it because it has to be done. And actually, interesting thing. So there was like a 4-H group we were working with, so they came and they watched me butcher this lamb, and they were like, and it was actually the cleanest one I ever did too, I might add. But just to say, one girl's like, she wouldn't eat meat for a week after that because she had never seen it done before. And I said before, this is what we're gonna do. This is how I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna shoot him. I'm gonna, just slit right, below the trachea, and then they're gonna bleed out, and this is how it's gonna happen. And they, oh, this is horrible. I mean, getting another occasion where I had a dog that was suffering. I had to put the dog down. People were like, "Oh, this is so evil." It's like the dog is dying. I'm not doing this out of malice. Another time where a dog gored up one of my sheep, just a stray dog somebody dumped in my area. So I had to put it down, right? Because once it's done that, it's going to do something to someone else's livestock or to another person. It's now a danger. You have to do that. And I put this on my Twitter for years because I was mad. I was mad that somebody's dumping the dog because this should be a happy dog in somebody's living room. And people are like, "You killed a dog. You're Hitler. You're literally Hitler." It's like, good grief. It killed 2 of my sheep.
First off, anyone that actually knows anything about Hitler knows how he wouldn't kill dogs.
He loved animals. He would not have killed the dog even if it had killed somebody's sheep.
And we see it like you brought up a minute ago, Ryan, where we're letting criminals back out, and that's on purpose, right? They're doing that as a demoralization, to increase chaos.
Yeah, the judges are not stupid. This is something that's being done by design.
Exactly. And what's eventually going to happen, because as we see now, people are losing trust in institutions, whether it's academia or police or whoever. And the modern citizen now, there eventually is going to come a point where people are going to feel that it is their right to do something about it because the institutions aren't doing anything now. And that's going to be the turning point, right? It's like what I've, especially during COVID, I expected more was, and we're seeing a little bit now within the last year or two. For instance, about 18 months ago, there was a judge who was presiding over a case where a young lady was raped and killed, and the perpetrator was let go because he was found not to be capable of, he was not sane. And basically, what they said, and they let him back out. And so the father of the daughter took matters into his own hands and unalived the perpetrator, but he also killed the judge, right? Because he thought it was mostly the judge's fault for letting it happen. And I think we're going to see more of that because people they're at their wits' end. Order has to be maintained for us to have some type of semblance of life, but we're going to have to go through a period, unfortunately, where there's a lot of violence to get there. And what these examples we're bringing up with Constantinople and Belgrade and everything, it shows us that we are going to need good men of virtue to be able to be capable of that, which it's really on us to raise those men. Because I'm 45 years old. It's probably not going to be me. Might be my son, right? Or it might be the younger men in my parish. They're going to have to be the men of virtue that are willing to enact that violence to bring us back to some order.
Yeah. And it's part of the paradox too. because we have this kind of overwhelming notion of humanitas, of humaneness, right? It's come around in the 19th and the 20th centuries. In that century, I might add, the 20th century especially, you have the most gruesome, barbaric, horrible violence.
Yeah.
Right, with this notion of humaneness. And then the idea is, oh, we're so much better than they were. You look at them burning people at the stake and impaling people and hanging people. We're so much more like, yeah, by dropping napalm on non-combatant cities. What we wouldn't deal with H-bomb, just napalm on cities of civilians and nobody else. I mean, when we firebombed Tokyo, and how many innocent civilians died on account of that action? And yeah, in Dresden and all these places. And I mean, actually, Doolittle, to his credit, the commander in the Air Force, he was against it until he was ordered from the top, and he reluctantly went along with it. But he was not pushing. It was the British actually, and Roosevelt who were pushing night bombings, indiscriminate civilian bombings, and Doolittle felt this was against the Geneva Convention, even. But it was like, well, whatever we had to do to win the war. It's like, well, interestingly, in these more barbaric times, there were rules. Now, granted, they violated these rules of war, at different times. But the idea was you should not kill civilians. You have battle. Now, sacking cities, unfortunately, that you get all these bad things that happen. But nobody says it's good. Nobody says, well, that's the unfortunate thing of war. No, everybody hates and condemns the other one for it for generations. I mean, you look, it's 100 years that Germans were not well liked in Rome because of the Sacco di Roma, right, in 1527. And the horrors they did there, frankly, it'd make the Soviets blush. But then in general, what are the rules of war? Well, you kill combatants, you don't kill non-combatants. That's kind of a accepted thing, and they adhered to it far better then than we do now. The idea, oh yeah, well, war is hell, you just have to do whatever you want. Wait a minute, that might be an unfortunate truth. And it's not something that anybody wants, though. We're treating it like it's good. It's not good. It may happen, but we don't want it to happen. That's the thing.
I think another aspect we have to keep in mind is it is only the Christian nations who have any semblance of this dignity of life as well, and protecting this in life, because Muslims do not at all. Right. For example, one of the issues I had to deal with a lot in Afghanistan was we would have Afghans who would purposely put their family and their children in danger because what would happen if we accidentally killed like a kid or something? We would offer condolence payments to the family. So in order to get ahead monetarily, they would let their family get killed so they could get those condolence payments. If y'all aren't aware, right now we're giving $47 million a month to Afghanistan as condolence payments for the war. We've basically capitulated to them at this point, saying, "Hey, sorry about that whole Afghan war thing for 20 years."
Well, I mean, it's basically the effect of Biden. We fought for 20 years, to replace the Taliban with the Taliban, and millions upon millions of dollars of American armament. Oh, here you go. Off you go then. We won, victory, yay! It's like
when they could have just given it to us.
Yeah, I know. Where's my Toyota Hilux with a disco on the back? I mean, I'm still waiting for that. Right? But the Muslims don't. They have no concept of the dignity of life at all. And even here in America, which I've continued to profess is, look, the only good Muslim is a non-practicing Muslim. And a non-practicing Muslim is only a non-practicing Muslim until Muslims reach 10% of the demographics. And then they all become practicing Muslims. And then we start seeing beheadings in the streets.
And even if they're very westernized and very much inculcated in this notion of humanitas and certain Western values in this thing and decry the sight of blood, when it's their team, they're not going to hesitate to support it. They won't. It's just a knee-jerk reaction with only a handful of exceptions. That's what's going to happen. And the idea that, because Islam is not just a religion, it's a socio-political movement akin to communism, really. And it's both and. It's not either or. So there's one thing I know, like, I guess we've all turned to Team Holy Father with Trump and Iran stuff, but some of the things that he said with, Islam, it's like, now on the one hand, I try to give as much deference as I can to the Holy Father. But this whole attitude, Christians and Muslims, we can have brotherhood, we can have all these things. I'm like, No, only when we're in power and they're visitors, and that's for a temporary period. But the idea that we're just going to have, like in the Middle East, you had Christian communities that lived there for centuries alongside Muslims. Now, it was in their own countries, and generally the hostility was lax, but sometimes it flared up. Sometimes they would just come in and kill Christians again, kidnap your daughters and kidnap your sons for the harem and for the military. Or again, you got to pay the jizah, the poll tax. You have to pay the jizah, and it's in the Quran, it's in the Hadith, it's in the Sunnah. That the Ahlul Kitab, the non-believers, they have to pay the jizah, and it's in the blood. It's in the very political notions of what Islam is. You just can't get around that. And wherever once they declare Ummah, and as far as Islamic thinking is concerned, that is, they declare the community that this is Islamic territory now. It will always be Islamic territory. So Spain, Greece, Bulgaria, Macedonia, that's Islamic territory as far as they're concerned, because it was once ruled by Muslims and once a place where Ummah was established. India is still an Islamic country held by infidels, according to them.
That's they can have that, though, as far as we can trade them that one.
That's right. You guys all go over here. We'll get Constantinople back, right?
I mean, when you look at the time periods where there was the least persecution of Christians living in Muslim lands, it was under Muslim leaders that were considered to be very lax in their religious duties.
Right. And that could change. That could change very quickly, depending on your ruler. When you get to the Armenian genocide, for example, and that's under the de-Islamicized secular Kemalist regime.
Yeah,
that you have the slaughter of so many Armenians, and it's it's a secular government, but we gotta wipe all these people out because they're by and large Christian, and any Muslim Armenians were not killed.
Yeah, it reminds me of there was that poll that was done amongst Muslims a few years ago. Then it was done again. It was done 10 years ago as well, but the most recent one was only a couple of years ago, asking them what Muslims that favored Sharia law, even in Western countries, and 80%, like it was between 76 and 80%, favored Sharia law in the Western countries, right? And this just speaks to the fact that they're unable to assimilate even in the Western countries because they create their little enclaves, as we're seeing in Rob's backyard. They create these little enclaves, and they never let go of it. Right? Raymond Ibrahim had a really good video about the Ummas, right, and was speaking about specifically Spain and stuff, because he had a video about the Reconquista, and they never. That's always, it will always, like you said, be declared a Muslim land, even if it's being taken over by the kafir. So that's an ongoing issue that we're going to have to deal with, and we have to understand that we cannot ally with these people at all, and we can't ally with the Middle Eastern New Jersey cult either, right? Because they're both Antichrist, and that is not anyone that we can have. Now we can ally with the Protestants and the Orthodox, because we're pretty much playing with some of the same set of rules
to a point. Although the Protestants don't much want to be, at least the ones on Twitter, they don't want to be much.
American Protestants are the worst. American Protestants are the absolute worst. But we cannot. These are not people. It's not an either or. It's not, well, because I'm against the nation state of Israel doesn't mean I'm for Islam. No, I'm against both.
There are no good guys. Right? Latin Kingdom of Jerusalem. That's what I support. But here we are. There's another thing in that with there's so much. It's got to be two sides. If you support Israel, you're against the Muslims. If you support them, if you're against Israel, you must support the Muslims. Like, what if I don't support either? It's like just because I don't. I have various opinions on the administration's war in Iran. It doesn't mean I like the Iranian government. Actually, I don't. Don't let anything, although they are trolling the heck out of it, and actually I'm loving the Iranian troll videos. It's like who would have known World War III would be mostly fought in memes, Lego memes, but it's hilarious. But it's like they got a modicum of respect out of me for that. But I don't like the Iranian regime. I don't want them to stay in power. But does that mean we need to come in with them? Oh yeah, they look our embassy back in the 80s. It's like there's more geopolitics goes on in that. And honestly, what do I know about what's happening in Iran? Nothing. Do I know that the government's killing its people? We've heard this playbook before. Gaddafi's given his troops Viagra to rape people. It's like, have you guys stopped to think of the logistics of that? How that actually works? And of course, there was never any evidence ever provided for that. So I've never been there. I haven't seen what's going on. Maybe they really did kill a lot of their people protesting. And maybe that's all made up, like mass graves in Serbia and all these other things. But really, ultimately, so I don't know. What I do know is Western elites love Islam and have for like 150 years. You read the book, and you guys read the book, The Flying In by G.K. Chesterton?
No.
You've got to go buy yourself a copy of that. It's a fantastic book. So it's basically about how an Islamic invasion of England would come about. And who would have thought of that in 1920, imagining an Islamic takeover of England? Chesterton pretty much saw exactly how it is playing out now. And I don't think he himself meant it to be like an actual prediction, even though it's been almost 100% right in all of it. It was something that came about as mostly as thoughts on prohibition in America. And it says, well, how could that happen in England? Well, it wouldn't happen because they would just legislate it out because nobody would support it. They would come through enculturation and supporting Islam. And then just like the elites want to support Islam in a force that they really can't control, but they think they can. And so that's more or less what happens in the book. There's this one British politician, Lord Ivywood, and he's like in the thralls of this one Turk. And he's seeing this intellectual purism of certain ideas in Islamic theology and thinking. And so he's gradually working in more and more laws, changing the way that the English live in order to accommodate Islam and bringing in Muslims into England, which will then serve as the enforcers for it. And their idea is like this Hegelian antithesis to the thesis. We're going to have this new synthesis of a new man that comes out of this conflict of cross and crescent to get rid of the old world, and they'll be presiding over all of it at the end. I don't know about you. I'm looking around at most of Europe and parts of the United States. I'm like, why does that sound so familiar? It's exactly what's happening. So buy the book, The Flying In. I don't publish
Flying In, okay.
By Chester. It's also got some great poems. It's basically they're making all the inns illegal unless you have a pub sign. It's this big Irish captain, Dalroy, comes back to his old pub and it's being demolished, and so he takes stock of the situation. Grabs his barkeeper friend, grabs the pub sign, smashes a policeman, grabs a cask of cheddar and a cask of rum, and runs off with the sign and the bartender. They go setting up the sign, so now it's legal to drink. And they pour the rum for people, and it's great. It even shows media. There's even a chapter on media manipulation. I'm just like, good grief! This thing absolutely called the modern world 100%.
It makes me wonder what the groundwork that was laid, especially like with Vatican II, and now we're at this point where it's kind of it's not been prescribed, but it's more of implied that all religions kind of lead to the same place, right? And we see a lot of our prelates espousing the same things, right? And so these little steps, these little cobblestones have been placed down for us to step on to eventually get to where we're at right now,
right?
And whether it's manufactured or maybe it's allowed to happen by God in order to get to where He wants us to go. I think the only outcome at this point is there has to be a massive overturning of the world.
Right.
Either that means the Antichrist is on the stage and we're at the end of time, or this is like a practice run for that time.
Right. Which could be, maybe 3 days of darkness, right? I don't know. I'm actually not a big believer in that, although got my blessed candles just in case. But but something, and there is supposed to be like a period of peace, and it's not just a question of Fatima. It's also in certain church fathers and coming of a great monarch. But I mean, it would have to be such a massive change in the world. But I mean, you just think of little thing like disrupting your energy, disrupting your food supplies, and living through, you know, various riots that will ensue, especially in urban areas out of that. Military conscription, Islamic invasion. I mean, who knows how the world could be transformed even in 20 years? How absolutely different everything could be. You know, it's hard to, you know, to predict precisely how it's all going to come about. I don't know. I've been wrong before, but you know, the prognosis for the future looks like a lot of pain and suffering. I don't think people are ready for it. And I guess you return to Constantinople. What was the cry for the anti-Latin party? Better the turban than the tiara, right? Well, they found out 300 years of slavery to the Turk, and they found out how well that worked out for them. So it's you know, the people today that's to say, you know, Israel harder or wherever, you know, it is, they're going to find out what exactly all that entails.
Right. What is your opinion on Holzhauser, and what is the 7 ages of the church? I think it's 6 ages, 7 ages.
I largely agree with his position, you know, and the idea that we're at the end of the 5th age, which began with the Reformation, and that there will be a chastisement, you know, maybe like the minor tribulation that's often talked about prior to leaving us into the 6th age, which, you know, could be called the, you know, the reign of the Immaculate Heart, you know, the age of the great monarch and holy pope, angelic pope, as seen, you know, in other mystics, before, you know, the final tribulation and, you know, the 7th age, which is the end, the eschaton.
Right. Well, as I understand it, the 6th age is supposed to be the shortest age, right?
From what I've read and learned, yes, that 6th age is probably, you know, it's literally like the reign of the great monarch and the angelic pope, and probably not much longer than that.
Yeah.
All I can say is so far through the 5th age, it tracks.
It does.
Yeah.
It really does.
You can't really, you know, say it doesn't. And then the question is, what does the 6th and 7th age look like? And, you know, are we in the 6th age now? Or are we still in the 5th? You know, and I don't know. It's I will have to see really how it plays out. So I'd like to be kind of softer on the future prophecy. You know, there's some things you can see clearly just by their causes and their beginnings. There's other things like, well, we don't exactly know how that's going to play out. You know, it's like, you know, whoever the Antichrist is, he's going to be very intelligent, and he's going to be liked by everybody.
That's how we know Donald Trump isn't it.
Yep, Donald Trump's not it. There's too many people that hate his guts. I don't even think he's smart enough actually either. But beside that, it's like whoever this guy is, maybe like Elon Musk used to be before he went Team Trump for a brief time, where he was the darling of every party. Everyone loved him. He seemed fairly well spoken. He would get on the Rogan podcast, and everyone loves these Rogan podcasts, left and right, center. You know, people are like digging the guy, even though they don't agree with everything. It's just, he's such a great guy. Antichrist to be like that exponentially more. Everybody's gonna like it. How could you not think this guy is sent from God?
Right.
And that's why even the elect, if it were possible, would be, you know, confused and tempted by it. That's how strong it's going to be. So it's not going to be like back when Obama's the Antichrist. Like, Obama's not smart enough to be the Antichrist. A, B, too many people hate him. Same thing with Trump. On the other side, still too many people, you know, hate him. So it's my Hollywood's all still like curled up in their bed, afraid of like thinking Trump's going to send Gestapo raids to Los Angeles to go round him up and put him in camps or something, because they really literally believe he's Hitler. Even though
I might like him again then.
I know. If only he was as awesome as the left thinks he is.
Right, I know. Yeah, no kidding. I mean, I was never in the Trump train. I was always like, this guy's full of it. I don't believe it. And sure enough, he locked us down. He gave us the COVID jab, set up the program for the next guy to come run, and he's doing the same thing again. He's setting up the technocratic control grid. Next guy will come in and run it. And then they will say, oh, it's all only we had Trump back. He wouldn't have done all this stuff. It's like every president going back 100 years set up the tools for the next guy to push down harder and taking away your rights and crush things.
Really, since Lincoln,
every single one. Yeah. I mean, they kind of put the genie back in the bottle just a little bit with Lincoln, but
until Wilson, I suppose.
Yeah, at least Wilson. And so, but with we could go on about that for quite a while, but it's that's just the way that it goes to nolite credere in principiibus. Don't put your trust in princes.
Mm-hmm.
It's like if Trump does something good, hey, we'll come out and say he did something good. If it did something like I was supported his immigration policy until he backed off.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I we had a question earlier for Ryan, didn't we?
There's a couple. One is, should we consider Vlad Orthodox or Catholic?
Yeah, as far as I'm aware, he died Catholic. There were certain points where he would work with one or the other, but he knew that he needed support from the West, and so he as far as I'm aware, he died as a Catholic, but I might have to look up just to make sure.
Because he would have, when did he die?
1477 or 76. 76 he died.
I'm gonna be real impressed if that's correct.
I'm not sure which one. I could go look it up here, but
if only we had these small little things in our hands that had the power.
You're right. I hate doing it though. I didn't know. I need to go back and read it. It's actually one thing with knowledge. It's the Latin word for like to know. It's given in a past tense only, in the perfect tense. Cognovi, right? To have learned. Therefore, because you learned it, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's what, at least in classical Latin, cognovi. I learned it, therefore I know it. Mm-hmm. And so if I have to go pull up my fondle slab and go look it up and say, oh yeah, here, I don't know it. I called a friend, basically, like that is what the intro that was, and so, but I didn't know it. So back to the drawing board, go read all this stuff again, get into some more books, and then I will know it, drill it down again. So that's why I hate that.
Someone wants to know if you can comment on Our Lady of Sinj in Dalmatia.
I've
not heard of it.
It's a shrine. I know it's a shrine that I think was built by an Italian, but I'm just not sure. It is a major Croatian shrine. Was it Croatian?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's a painting venerated as miraculous.
Mm-hmm.
Created potentially by a Venetian artist.
Oh, there's the Italian. Okay. Yeah, I remember something about that somebody's telling me from the area, but
see if I can show a picture here.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, I know that image. Yeah, so I don't know what the miracles surrounding it are, but
right.
I'm going to say defeated a Muslim onslaught. Okay, I'm going to take a note of that to do some research into that one.
Wow, that is a weak Wikipedia article.
Yeah, generally is. I mean, the only thing I'll ever do with Wikipedia is like if I know absolutely nothing about something, go read it, kind of get my pointers down, certain terms, certain ideas. Now we go to the bottom. Now where's our sources?
Right.
Click on one of those, nothing satisfactory, and then go find the real sources. Then do the study. So, because anyone can put anything in a Wikipedia page, and so you never know when you'll be led astray. Or
get the assumption the Virgin Mary appeared and scared the Turks away.
Fish Eaters has that.
Yeah,
Fish Eaters has an article on it. Yeah, Fish Eaters has an article on it.
Does it? I'll have to look at Fish Eaters.
Yeah, I'll go bookmark that. Actually, there's one thing we should mention too, since we're talking about Constantinople. One of the things, especially if you get with the Orthobros online, but it's even a general thing in Orthodox publications. Oh, they went to Florence and promised union for help that never came. Well, one, it's not like Europe was some monolithic bloc sitting at the Pope's control. The Pope might have liked that, but it wasn't the case. The English and the French were fighting the 100 Years' War. You had, Spain, they were fighting their own battles in Naples and other places. You're distracted. Germany, the empire was caught up with the Hussite wars.
Hungary was already fighting the Ottomans.
Yeah. So the Hungarians are already in the thick of it. And it's, what's the possible, so Father Philip Hughes, really good church historian, especially Reformation historian, but he also writes in other matters. He has a really great line that I wanted to read on that. Okay. It is perhaps this last effect, the destruction of, Christian, life in the East and the dominance of the Turks. This last effect of the Turkish conquest, which was the most disastrous of all from the point of view of religion. Even had the popes been able to bring about the impossible, to put new life into the France of Charles VII, to unite in immediate harmony the England of the Wars of the Roses, to banish the Hussite feud still eating away the vitality of Germany, and then uniting these mutually antagonistic national interests and combining these princes with those maritime states of Italy, whose policy was, in its inspiration, the least Christian of all, to launch a well-planned, well-organized joint attack at a distance of months of marching from its bases. And even had the attack been successful and the Turks 500 years ago crippled forever, what could the papacy thereby have gained for religion? Territories where the victorious Latin princes would assuredly have been the rulers, and where populations violently attached to their anti-Latin prejudices would continue to prefer the temporal rule of Islam to the spiritual rule of the Pope. Nothing but a succession of miracles, suspensions of the laws of nature of things, in the fields of diplomacy and war, could have now brought the Christian cause to triumph over the Turks. And nothing but a new series of miracles could have saved the land so liberated from the bloody anarchy, which had been their fate already for generations, wherever Latins ruled Greeks and Hellenized Slavs. It is, however, rarely given to any man to see the problem of his own hour in all its dimensions. What is demanded of him by posterity is that he shall have faced the crisis generously, with a total abandonment of self-interest. By this test, the popes of this generation might be judged to have succeeded, and in the continuous 9 years' effort of the two popes, Calixtus III and Pius II, the papacy now reaches to heights unscaled since Gregory X. So, it's they really didn't have the power to bring that kind of aid. They already brought as much aid as they could get out against the greatest force in the world at the time. But what if they had done it? We already see the anti-union party at Constantinople. Even as you've got 7,000 or so Latins here to defend the city at risk to their lives, and money and things that has already come in from the papacy. They can't make the King of France and the King of England do their will, right? And even if they could have miraculously defeated the Turk and driven them even out of Anatolia, what would have happened? I think the anti-Latin party is a sign of what would have happened and continued to. So it's I don't think that it's a part of the spirit of the age and the direction that the East had gone in. I think it is going to take that succession of miracles that Father Hughes was talking about to bring about that breaking of the anti-Latin spirit, as well as a generous spirit on this side of it too.
Mm-hmm. And if that had been God's act of will, it would have happened.
Yeah. That's the thing. His permissive will allowed it, and he didn't create a brand new miracle to do that.
So it's the Greeks' fault. Got it. The whole thing.
That's what Bellarmine thinks, actually. When Bellarmine's addressing Greek Orthodox writers, principally Nelas Kapasias, in his book on the papacy, I think that's where he says it. He talks about the pride and arrogance of the Greeks being the cause of so much of their. Or it's in his book on the Marks of the Church, where he even says that the pride and arrogance of the Greeks is the cause of their own fault. Now they don't like to hear that, But even in their own sources, it's fairly clear that a lot of that's going on. So,
and we see that pride and arrogance even today with where we have the Russian Orthodox Church who's in schism with the Greeks
right.
And they've never been able to get past it.
It's like Soloviev said, there are largely a bunch of national churches. Now, they might have good arguments for bad things going on in the Catholic Church right now. They want to sling at us. All right, fair cop. But realistically, though, the Orthodox churches have always been national churches. Ultimately, Caesaropapism ruled the day. Whereas the emperor is largely going to have control of the church. And use it, for his methods. And it's one of the reasons that it distinguishes the West, where the papacy was always independent. Even if, especially especially in this period when the state is encroaching upon the life of the church in so many different ways, controlling, who's nominated bishop, putting a 3-year-old nobility, a 3-year-old boy is from a Geese or some other major household over an abbey with a lot of income, and all that income goes to that royal family now, not to the use of the monastery or the church or the people. All these kind of crazy things, the state encroaching on the church. But even that, you still have to reckon with the Pope, somebody who is independent of them. And the way you break the spell is like, the German princes following Luther and Henry VIII, and just go off and become like the Orthodox, but no sacraments. It's that's what they do. And Henry VIII is total Caesaropapism. It's a true theocracy under Henry VIII. They modified a bit under Elizabeth, but under Henry VIII, he is the Pope of the Church of England, as well as being the temporal lord as well. Right? He wants to be in charge of people's bodies as well as their souls. So, it's it leads down to that rejection. The first steps of trying to reject that independent authority create national churches in the West. So and that's why so much revolves around the Pope. That's like the one issue that all Protestants, all Orthodox, who always be at loggerheads on until once you accept that, everything else falls into place.
By this point, by 1453, I imagine the Varangian Guard was a relic of history.
Oh yeah. The entirety of the Byzantine army is largely mercenaries at this point in 1453, Western mercenaries or whatever few tributary areas they can afford to draw or from their own population. Their arms and armament would have been similar to Western troops, plate armor, brigandine, chainmail, and helmets like in that. I mean, they might have some relics left over. So the Varangian Guard, that's back to Viking times. And that lasted pretty much, I think, after 1204. It was not reconstituted. Even before 1204, it was a relic. Most of them are fighting in southern Italy against the Normans, and right before the First Crusade. And it's actually funny when the supposed schism, because the 1054 date is just like this pop history date,
right?
But because it only affected the patriarch, didn't excommunicate all of Constantinople, didn't excommunicate the other patriarchs. It only excommunicated Carolius. There is a sense in Constantinople of being out of communion on that account, but it wasn't the whole East was suddenly in schism, just boom like that. So it was degrees and new problems that eventually drove that further away. But still, so in southern Italy, what's the Pope doing? He's fighting to maintain Byzantine lands against the Normans. And Leo IX ends up where? In a Norman jail because his troops got defeated by the Normans. The Varangian Guard got slaughtered. As the
Vikings
fighting against the Vikings, fighting for them. But anyway, so I've seen Varangian Guard as late as like 1100. There's still some, but I don't even know if they're actual Danes or Scandinavians at that point. Who knows?
You got anything else, Adrian?
Just to bring up some of the tropes that come up on X, because we always see the sack of Constantinople by the Crusaders, and I think people always think that's in a vacuum, that came out of nowhere, right? And people seem to gloss over the massacre of the Latins. What was it, 20, 30 years before that?
Oh yeah. And I mentioned that briefly. I decided to pass over it because who knows what new dimensions that opens up. But yeah, because the Italians had a trading city in Pera. We mentioned it. That's where they put the chain across the Golden Horn to to defend the harbors and whatnot in Constantinople. So that trading city, there was a massacre of the Latins. All the Latins who were there, which came about through a steady building of anti-Latin feeling. And that was before 1204 even happened. What the Doge in Venice, who does so much to manipulate and control the Fourth Crusade and direct it at Constantinople, he was blinded during the sack of the Latins. He never forgave the Byzantines, and so he worked really hard to get the support for this pretender to the throne, because he wanted to have like the coup de grace of controlling Byzantium through that and making that part of the maritime empire. And it ultimately it went awry with the whole sack. It wasn't anything that he directly intended, not that way, although he certainly profited from it, and Venice profited from it by getting a lot of treasures from Constantinople and bringing them to Rome. Or not Rome, sorry, to Venice.
How much effect did the sack in 1204 have on the eventual, defeat and fall of Constantinople 250 years later?
Right. It had a huge effect because the city never recovered. Now, it's not true the city was an utter and absolute shambles, but it had been generally depopulated, and because of the danger of the Turks and everything. And so they had converted a lot of empty land into farmland within the city, which certainly helped their food problems. But it definitely weakened their administration, their treasury, their hold on, especially in Greece and the Aegean and other places. The holdings they had across in Anatolia were incredibly weakened, and the Turks definitely took advantage of that. So when the Paleologus restore the empire and drive out the last of the Latin kingdom, the city's not the same. They don't have the same power or control that they used to have. It's clearly a dying institution, and might not have been if it wasn't for 1204. So, and that's why too Greeks remember 1204 and the great betrayal of the Latins. Forget about all the other stuff, but they'll remember that. The help that never came.
You're right.
Mentioned the help that did come, but just wasn't enough.
Well, Adrian, anything else there?
I need to decompress. just digest.
There's a lot.
Everything I just heard.
I never even got to talk about Greek fire, because that's one of those fun ones where they developed it in like the 8th century. It was basically similar to napalm. Nobody knows exactly what its chemical composition was, but they could actually project it forward, and then it would burn. And like napalm, it would continue burning, and the water would just spread the fire around.
Yeah, It is kind of cool. It's one of those historical mysteries where, like you said, we really don't know how they made it, where they get,
right. We know from the Arab sources as well as their own that they did. There's a tradition that like an angel had revealed the recipe during the second siege of Constantinople by the Arabs, which could be. I like that story, but either way, there's even in the sources reports about flamethrowers, about handheld flamethrowers to shoot Greek fire. We don't know. I mean, the sources mention it. That's why it's plausible. And if they could do it out of a ship, they could probably, do it in a handheld fashion. But it wasn't that widely developed and spread. That tells me that wasn't an effective military. It's like early cannon, probably blows up more often than it, holds together. So
they tended to keep it really close to the chest, right? Like it was their greatest military secret. So
right. For a very long time. And, other people had things they called Greek fire, but it wasn't the same thing.
So we could also look at like World War II with flamethrowers. Like the average life expectancy of a flamethrower is like 11 seconds.
Yeah.
Once they hit the beach of Normandy. So it's probably, to your point, right, it's probably a fact that it just tactically was not a good
Right.
option.
Did you get that Instagram reel I sent you the other day, Adrian?
What was it? Was it better than the one I sent you of the Marine emo?
Way better. It's something about flamethrowers on Iwo Jima, and then it was a video of a kid with a leaf blower with the red blanket attached to the
Yes.
end, using it as like a flamethrower against his brothers and sisters.
Man, if y'all saw the reels that Rob and I send each other from Instagram,
I've seen that you can legally purchase World War I era flamethrowers now. How well do those work?
My local fleet tractor supply store has them. I just haven't bought one yet.
I want to get one that mounts to the bottom of my AR.
AR,
Right.
That'd be amazing.
That would be something.
With enough redneck ingenuity, you could make any of them mount to that.
Yeah, I probably could. Because like what
It makes you think aliens tying the pulse rifle and the flamethrower together. So you got them both.
Yeah.
Because there's one, on the gun tube side of things, which is more where I'm at. There's always a conversation of close quarter battles or CQB, or like going into a building, right, and having to take out, like what we did in Fallujah, right. And I'm of the mindset, brother, I ain't doing that. I'm just going to set the house on fire, right? And then
your favorite saying is
they come out.
Yeah, your favorite saying is, why do CQB when you can do arson instead?
Exactly.
There's a question here from White Knight. What are your favorite medieval weapons? And I figured I'll go first. My favorite medieval weapon is the poleaxe. It's one of the most versatile weapons generally. And your technique with it, so you've seen those probably pictures of them. You got an axe, some type of hammer development on one side, spike at the top, but then on the bottom, this is the part people miss. There's a spike at the bottom too, or a pointed butt of it. So your tactic in hand-to-hand combat with that is actually this, almost like a small spear. This is actually your first one, especially against an armored knight. You want to knock that stinker down and then wallop him with the hammer. That's what you want to do. And his helm or something else, make his head ring. Because I've got that great helm up there. If you ever get hit with one of those, even with the padding, your head is ringing, right? You get tinnitus, something awful, and you're going to be a bit out of it for a while if you take a hit up there. It's just not. It might save your life, but it's not going to be fun going with that. So if you're a knight, fully armored, full body armor, you get smacked with one of those by someone who's less armored, that's going to affect you, and they can knock you down. And that's when they come in with a dagger, start getting in the joints, try to cut you, get some badge or something to show whether you're valuable nobility or you're a dangerous man at arms, right? But otherwise, anyway, with the poleaxe, other than knocking someone down, you lock in close quarters. Once you got enough clearance, you can swat this way if you're up on a horse. Great for getting down at smacking your peasant conscripts with either end of it as you're going, going through. A really handy weapon for a lot of different types of the thing. Really effective against armor, especially if you're in like a hobber, like a gambeson and chainmail, or even a brigandine, which is going to protect you against a lot of stuff, but you're not up to as heavily armored as that knight who can still run you through at close range. You need something that can knock him over, get in the joints of his armor, and this is one of the best things you've got. Arrows, even at close range, even for brigandine, arrows don't actually go through the armor a lot of time. Now, with brigandine, you're not fully plate armor, so you might get the leg, you might get elbows, you might take off a bit of the hand, which is in mail for the most part. It's not always articulated plate armor for a lot of people. It depends what they can afford. But but a direct arrow. Now you can get like an ideal hit with a crossbow right up close, and the bolt will generally go through the armor, 20 yards, 30 yards. A little further out than that, a lot of times it's going to bounce off. And especially with the design of the armor, the bevels, and of course, you're out of ideal conditions where the guy's just sitting there and you shoot him. He's moving, right? That moving can deflect the bolt, could deflect the arrow. So a lot of times when knights are killed, it's actually close up by getting in the joints or lifting up the cod piece. And I don't want to say that that's horrible. For the ephemeral artery, just get in there and cut the throat. all kinds of horrible, gruesome stuff. That. But
have
anyway,
you seen
what's your favorite medieval?
But have you seen the armed MMA?
Yes,
Yeah, I've seen that
It's
before.
awesome. It's
it is
awesome.
good.
It is so good. I would say my favorite medieval weaponry is the Holy Hand Grenade of Antioch. You shuck out to 3, not 4, not 2, but 3.
5 is right out.
That's gonna date us on that one. Everyone will be like, "What are you talking about?"
I guess I'm a simple man. I just like the plain old arming sword.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I've got we've got a local HEMA chapter, and I keep wanting to go down there and just kind of check it out. I want to take my son down. I think it'd be fun just to kind of play around with. But I watch some of them on YouTube and stuff. And I watch them with my son. And he's like, "Dad, is that how they actually fight?" Because there's another channel where they tested plate armor and they test modern weaponry against it. And
Yeah,
plate armor will stop 5.56.
really.
So all these theories they have, like, what would happen in the Crusades if there was 50 Marines? Like the 50 Marines would be slaughtered because that 5.56 is not going through the plate armor, especially the cavalry.
Yeah. No doubt. Now, I mean, close up, probably. Yeah. But again, it's the same thing with the arrows and the crossbows. Ideal conditions. The guy's moving around, and you got different things that are deflected. Yeah, I'm sure we got rounds that'll put them down. But even like the gunpowder, the arquebus balls, right? Little ball shot. That was hit or miss. That did not always penetrate. A lot of the kills actually found the joints in armor, and of course the standard in armor was changing because it's not even that it was considered less effective; it's just so expensive, and the economy that supported that landed aristocracy that had that that plate mail, full plate armor, that was going away, and that became the plaything of kings for jousting throughout the 1500s, kind of showing off their prowess by having the coolest armor. Some of them do have really cool armor, I might add. But you're equipping your troops, or you've got another nobleman who's equipping troops. What do you go for? You go for basic bit of plate, can be mass produced. Anyone can wear it. Straps on the back, helmet, and you'd have some chainmail. Eventually, the chainmail starts going away altogether. Now you've got a gambeson underneath, plate, full chest plate, and that's what you go with. And it makes it easier, especially as you go to the pike and cavalry tactic, and then pike shot and cavalry tactic for the Spanish tercio. And because everyone's reading, the Swiss had actually done it first; it was really effective. So the under the Holy Roman Emperor Maximilian I, they developed the Landsknechts, literally in German, land knights, because they're armored like knights somewhat, but their armor goes in this fashion, and they form the pike squares like Alexander the Great. And it's mainly meant to be using, same idea with Alexander the Great, hammer and anvil, right? And this is still studied in military academies today. You lock down the main force with the pike squares so that they're kind of pinned in position. They got to try to hack their way through these things with their swords. They get stabbed by another one as they go through. It's slow going, trying to break that unit up. While you're all doing that, the cavalry comes from behind in the rear and causes a rout. And then that army, that infantry just disappears. So the same type of tactic is being employed, but now it's you're against heavy cavalry that can outflank. So you need troops on the sides. You need swordsmen. You need lesser spearmen. You need arquebusiers, right? Gunmen. And they, like in the Spanish, perfect this. They're with the tercio. The arquebusiers move in. They plant their stake. They get their weapons usually ready to fire. And then they step back. Next one comes up. They're back there reloading. Okay. And just like you do with flintlock, same thing with matchlock. Pretty much same. There's a few more steps because of the match and your primer pan and everything. Because your trigger, we talked about this. It's just a mechanism with a burning match that goes into the pan. Still, the kinetic energy fires the ball. So that take it cumbersome to reload. But if you got the Spanish had this down, they had the ranks. They would meander in. And then they, come back out, reload, come back in, right? And that's effective enough because even if you, might not penetrate the cavalrymen, you kill the horse. A lot of poor horses met their fate on battlefields from arrows or crossbows or shot.
How reliable were early grenades, and what were their kill range?
A lot of grenades would be like hollowed out cannonballs filled with gunpowder and have a bit of saltpeter rope. The Knights of Malta use them, and they would shoot out shrapnel. I mean, the range from the explosion would be short range. Whoever's standing around a couple meters at best. I'd have to go double check the earliest ones, because the first grenades, they were like hollowed out cannonballs. Well, they were just too thick. They absorbed too much of the shock, so they started making those things thinner and more effective. That way, and they'd actually start casting the hollow ball and then fill it up with gunpowder. But then what they would do is start filling up with shrapnel and other things to blow up with it. So when the saltpeter came down, it hit its kinetic energy. It would just blast out all the shrapnel, and that would actually do far more damage than like the outer shell coming out or the explosion itself. And especially for the Turks at Malta, they've got a lot of flowing robes and other things in their uniforms. They catch fire. And then the Knights of Malta had another thing almost as devastating for these early cannonballs. They would wrap rope soaked in cloth soaked in saltpeter around these hoops, make it like a hula hoop, light the thing on fire and throw it on down. So you're charging up, all of a sudden these fiery things come down at you. You either start moving the other way, try to get out of the way, catches on fire, you catch on fire. A lot of burns. It's great for slowing down a charge, bringing down the morale, and then you stand up and you get shot, or you stand up and you get stabbed by somebody repelling the charge has come down, sortie, cavalry, whatever. Really great for breaking up infantry charges that way.
Oh, Adrian, what's the range of modern grenades? Is it still 5mm kill radius and 15 casualty?
Yeah, your shrapnel, really your fragmentation grenade, you're looking at 5 meters is the kill radius, 15 meters is casualty radius, because it's separated to like what race is going to kill, what race is going to injure,
right?
But when I deployed, we didn't give a lot of grenades out because we found out that a lot of guys don't play baseball anymore. So they don't know how to throw. And like when I've got friends that do like construction and stuff, like one rule they have is it's always left-handed anger, right? So when they get mad, instead of destroying something with their right hand, which is they would always do like left-handed anger, right, type of thing. That's what everybody looked like throwing grenades. When we went to the grenade range and base and boot, or other people have basic, man, the people just cannot throw. So a lot of times we don't have it. Now, a lot of my second or my first deployment, no, my second deployment, I had the grenade launcher on my rifle, which was a horrible idea, by the way. It was way too heavy. I hated having to go on patrols with that thing because it was like an extra 10 pounds I didn't need. But that was the really the development for people because they just can't throw. And then, but like Fallujah, we saw it a lot. We saw a lot of flashbangs, a lot of fragmentation grenades, because you would just toss it in the doorway real quick and then peel around the doorway, but you didn't have to really throw it that far.
Right. Ryan, were flares actually medieval weapons?
They meant flails. They corrected it in a subsequent comment. Flails were actually used, but they were not like your ball and spiky chain type of thing. Those are all Victorian recreations. There's a lot of stuff about the Middle Ages the Victorians just basically made up, comes to their fevered imagination, or they assume something must be so and they created it. And then those are where your examples come from, not from actual medieval combat. But people had flails. They were two-handed, like a long stick, and at the end of it would be either chains with pieces of sharp bits on them, or or spiky things, and they were actually designed. They were yard tools for clearing weed whacking, basically.
Oh, okay.
That's what they're for. And but when you're conscripted to go fight in the Count's army and you don't have a weapon, well, you grab your farm tools. So that's how the flail entered combat. And of course, the best you can do, I mean, terribly effective. You knock some guy in the head with that. You take his face off. It's also good to just use his quarterstaff, and to the extent that someone can do that. And when you're thinking people, they work in the fields all day, they're particularly built and not well-fed and sitting at home at a computer like me, they could do a lot of damage with that, actually. But the comical, ball and chain, as far as I'm aware, there's not a single battlefield example. There's not a particular bit of art that depicts that. You did have a mace. You had like a club, which is basically a metal club. Sometimes with spikes on it, sometimes not. Sometimes with a big hammer on it. Those were actually favored by bishops when they would go into battle, prince bishops and whatnot, because they would, come and smack you down and not draw blood directly. Might break your shoulder underneath, might crush your skull, but they didn't draw blood, so they don't incur irregularity. So you have that sort of thing.
Okay, last question, guys. Last question, and then I gotta go to bed.
Yeah, I gotta go.
What is the best medieval war scene in a movie in the last, just ever, in your opinion?
Medieval war scene.
Because I know you have very strong opinions about
yes. Yeah, terribly. I think so as far as medieval war scenes, the Bannockburn scene and the Outlaw King, as far as medieval combat goes, was pretty good.
Is that the follow-up to Braveheart?
Yes, except a 10 times better film. And it's far more accurate to the sources while still adapting and changing a few things. And the only thing you screw up is Bruce fighting Edward II directly. That never happened, really. So that was
that's a movie with Chris Pine.
Yeah, and he actually did really well in that. Actually, I liked him in that. And that was a particularly well done movie. Trying to think, because I've seen a lot. I think The Knight's Tale, for the silliness of the modern music in it, that actually worked really well. There were a lot of things you see there that are true to battles, because a lot of the tension you get in a Hollywood film, you got to build the tension. You got to get dramatic scenes in an actual melee, especially with most people not being fully plate armored. You're going to fight and you're going to kill someone in about 2 to 4 seconds, 2 to 6 seconds at the most. Right. And so in a good, well-disciplined battle order line, right, as either you're advancing or you're receiving a charge or whatever, you're going to get into a lot. Your first thing in most medieval battles is you're going to use your shield. That is an offensive weapon, not a defensive weapon. You just kind of sit there and cower under it. The guy's going to take his axe and just trash your shield and carve your skull out. But what you do actually is drive forward with your shield, push the guy over, and now you can stick him. You can crush his neck if you can get it with that's why the shields are pointed, because you smash down with it if you need to. And then the sword is largely for parrying. Shield knocks people off. You strike with the sword, and then if you need to, you run it through. Broadswords, that's mostly going to be once you've exposed the enemy. This is all happening in 2 to 6 seconds, maybe 8. Some, a handful of battles take a little bit longer, but eventually you're going to get killed by someone else, or you're going to knock the guy down and kill him, or he'll be killed by someone else. And especially when you get in the scrum, which is where everyone's, fighting in the midst of it all. You get some battles that really get horrible and muddy, like at Agincourt, for example. In the midst of it, it's just mud all over. I don't know if you've ever been to Agincourt, to that field. Even like a few days after it's rained, it's still kind of soft. Well, the failed cavalry charge with the French, it turned up that field. So when the infantry comes down, apart from getting over all the dead horses and whatnot, and they're marching through mud. Some of them, because they're in full plate armor, they're like getting stuck as they're. You've ever had that where you get your boot just in a real bad bog, and you lift up and your foot comes out right out, and the boot's still there in the mud. Well, that's what these guys are dealing with at Agincourt with their boots, their metal plate and everything, even though it's not not coming off your foot, but still. And then you're getting hit by arrows as you're coming down, which is definitely going to be ringing and annoying you. Some will die, hit the joints. Then you get into the knights, and of course, when you're in the melee with the knights, then what do the archers do? They drop their bows, pick up their bill hooks, their halberds, all these things. They come in, their knives. They come in and they start attacking the knights from the flanks, start going into all the joints, all these horrible ways to die, right? There is actually with what's his name? Timothy Chalamet. Some of the comments were wrong, the armor wasn't all done right, but the actual battle actually gets into some of this, how nasty it was. A lot of times it wasn't really quite that way. especially with the mud and everything, and it doesn't happen in every battle. But it does get very brutal, and especially if you're the unarmored peasant, or even if you're if you're in mail. Mail's good at turning, you're getting hit overhead, side hits, whatever. It's going to turn those. Now, your bones underneath will be broken, but it will turn the blades. You won't die per se, unless you got internal bleeding. In that case, medieval medicine can't help you. But those guys are still dying faster. Arrows will penetrate mail. Just the pressure, the force of the point will force the ring of the mail, and it will penetrate that way. And if you're lucky and it hits you just right, you got the quilted jerkin underneath your mail. It might stop the arrow from going through. Sometimes, based on the chroniclers, not as often as people would like, but it's still better than nothing. So it's I'm just thinking again. So Outlaw King, some of the battles in there. This movie with Timothy Chalamet. So I was on with TLM Ryan, and we were talking. We did a whole series in the Battle of Agincourt, and so we're talking about that. So in terms of medieval battles, let's see. I'm trying to think of a few other.
The one with Timothy Chalamet is called The King.
Yes, that's the one.
Then there's the Last Duel. I don't know if you've seen that one. It's got
I don't think so.
Is that the one with the really
Adam
accurate
Driver.
sword
It's got
fight?
Adam Driver, and you're thinking of The Duelist. That's from the 70s. The Last Duel's got what's his name? Ben Affleck, and it's not Ben Affleck, but what's the other guy that's always with Ben Affleck? Matt Damon.
Matt Damon.
He's got Matt Damon.
The two of them are joined at the hip
with Adam Driver.
Yeah.
But everyone who saw that said it's really good. So I haven't watched it yet. I don't watch a lot of movies, so
right.
Yeah, it's an Anthony thing. He loves his movies
because he's in the truck all day. It's all he can do. It's that and X.
And actually, I come to think of it, even though I don't like the Peter Jackson adaptations of Lord of the Rings, as movies, they're good movies. As adaptations, I strongly dislike them. But the Helm's Deep scene actually is very much like the Battle of Belgrade that you're talking about. Even down to Hunyadi riding out is very much how Theoden rides out. And there's a lot of that Tolkien, incorporates actually even the Pelennor Fields and the Siege of Gondor is a lot like what should have happened at Constantinople. And that looms very large because for a long time, in English historiography, you taught that Constantinople, that was the end of the medieval world. That was the way they used to present it. I don't think that's true because unless you were in the city, life didn't change for you on May 30th, 1453. So the world didn't suddenly change to be a new thing in anybody's imagination or the way anybody lived or the way anybody really thought, other than being afraid now of the danger of the Turk. So it's not really, the end of the world, but that's what they used to be taught. Right. I mean, really, if you want, when does the medieval world end? That's the Reformation. That's the central notion of the Middle Ages, the unity of faith and Christendom. That's utterly shattered at the Reformation. That's what changes the world, not Constantinople's fall. So, but that was loomed large in Tolkien's mind, and he references it in different places. Even Father Christmas letters, he references the year Constantinople fell. It's like it was one of those things in his head. So so Osgiliath and Gondor, that's like Constantinople.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think we're gonna have to call it here, guys. Ryan, thank you so much for coming on tonight and
you're welcome.
Giving us all your knowledge. It's amazing how much
Always
you know.
Glad to blab.
Adrian, thank you for joining me and taking Anthony's spot.
Look, I didn't want to leave you in here by yourself. I know you're, without Anthony here, you're kind of like a deer in headlights. So I wanted to come
it's
out.
true. 4 years and I'm still like that. I don't think I'm ever going to get over that.
Well, it's that melancholic, man, is what it is.
Yeah.
Anything being stuck with Anthony.
Yeah. Anything you want to promote before we go, Ryan?
Yeah, probably too many things. I think the book on Saint John Capistrano, it does not get enough love. People that see it who's John Capistrano? It may or may not know who he is. Well, anyway, goes into the Battle of Belgrade and the Battle of the Crusades in Serbia that we mentioned with Hunyadi, but also his work in reforming the church and so many things that he was worked with it within the culture of Renaissance Italy at that time and things. It's just a fantastic book. So Mediatrix Press, John Capistran. I did, that was the original title, and I decided not to change it. But whereas most people, they know him as Capistrano, but from the Italian. But anyway.
And I do have that a link to that book pinned in the live chat for everyone.
All right,
just
thank
so
you.
know. Adrian, Guns and Rosaries next week sometime.
Yeah, hopefully Monday.
Hopefully Monday.
Hopefully the world doesn't end by Monday.
It's it's funny because the stuff between Leo and Trump started to kick off late Sunday night. I sent it to Anthony at like 9 o'clock. He was, I think, already asleep. So he saw it when he woke up the next morning, texted me wanting to do a show right like Monday instead of Tuesday. And I texted Adrian. I go, Adrian, any chance we can move it from Monday? And he goes, Anthony, just can't wait, Kenny. He's like, Adrian knew exactly why I was asking that.
I knew exactly what it was. Yeah, I mean, keep in mind that everything that's happened since the Iran war has always kicked off on a Friday. So
True.
Be prepared for tomorrow. We'll see what happens. So Monday might be a little epic.
We could Brian, you could come on the other channel to do a historical gun episode sometime.
Yeah. Oh, that would be fantastic.
Yeah.
Just
well,
wish,
plan to do it all on X though.
Yeah, we will.
Right?
We won't be able to on YouTube at all.
Yeah. Darn. Yeah, if I had stuff I used to have or had access to stuff I used to have access to. Yeah, matchlocks, flintlocks, shot those extensively. That would be a lot of fun to get into.
I've been looking for the Papal Zoos rolling block. They're not easy to find.
No.
They're not that expensive when you do find them, but they're just not easy to find.
Yeah. Another fun gun to look into during the English Civil War, they try to develop the wheel block. You ever heard of these? So basically it was a pistol
wheel,
like,
right?
Yeah, spring reloaded wheel. It would spin to strike the flint and then ignite. And they were about 60% fire. They would actually fire. A lot of times it wouldn't, and you have to do it again, and then you get it.
Like a
not
thing.
terribly effective.
Well, they weren't shooting people in the legs randomly
on their own.
Give them a little bit of credit.
They weren't Secret Service agents shooting people, shooting things while using the light on their gun to find keys or whatever.
Could not believe that.
There was another 320 went off the day or two. She went through a guy and went through his leg twice and then hit his foot.
Good Lord.
Wow.
Yeah.
I don't know. I've never had a misfire. I've always carried in the chamber and never had a misfire.
Are you carrying a SIG 320?
No.
Well, that's why.
That's probably why. That's why. You're good. You're good.
No, I got a CZ07's my daily carry, but
nice.
Yeah. We're big fans of CZs over here.
Yeah, I carry a Shadow too.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
display
thank
it,
you.
but YouTube will kill it. So
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
all right.
See ya.